Okay, good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order for Tuesday evening, October 6th, 2020, and begin by making the following statement. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access, pursuant to an order issued by the Governor of Massachusetts dated March 12th, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the Town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of this meeting in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. May I please ask that if anyone is recording the meeting, if you could please use the raised hand function, or if you have not called, if you are calling by telephone and are recording the meeting, to please unmute yourself and identify that you are recording. Michelle, have I given that enough time?
Yes, thanks, Mary.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. We have, at the present time, about 54 people here for this meeting. We expect we may have more, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the Board of Selectmen meeting. My name is Mary Power. I'm the chair of the Hingham Board of Selectmen. My colleagues, and maybe they could raise their hands, Selectman Joe Fisher, Selectman Bill Ramsey.
Hello, everybody.
And as always, we are joined by our Town Administrator, Tom Mayo, and our Assistant Town Administrator, Michelle Monsegur. Before beginning the business portion of this meeting, the board would like to pause for a moment. This past Friday, October 2nd, as some of you may be aware, the town of Hingham lost one of its most dedicated public servants. Edna English served for 6 years on the Hingham Board of Selectmen, only the second woman to do so. She served for 16 years as a member of the Hingham School Committee and for 25 years as a member of the Hingham Library Board of Trustees. She also served on a number of town committees, including the Main High Street Traffic Light Committee and the Government Study Committee. For these and her many other contributions to our community, in 1997, Edna was recognized as Hingham's Citizen of the Year. Whether it was in her volunteer capacity or as an engaged citizen, Edna English set an example for civic and respectful discourse, and Hingham is the better for it. Her thoughtful questions and insightful remarks elevated our individual and collective understanding of issues and ultimately town meetings' consideration of them. Edna also understood that citizens could disagree without being disagreeable, and was gracious to everyone. Many years ago, I remember being in the audience for a town meeting in which two of Edna's children, Sturt English and Laura Marwell, each spoke on a warrant article. One supported the warrant article and the other was opposed to it. I think I had a little preview of what the holiday table looked like in the English home. But I happened to be sitting next to Edna, and her pride in her children was apparent. Hingham is very fortunate that her commitment to citizen involvement has been passed on to her children and so many people who had the privilege of working with her. On behalf of the board, the town of Hingham, the Board of Selectmen offers its condolences to Edna's husband, Bill, her children, grandchildren, and many friends and colleagues. I would ask now that we observe a moment of silence in memory of Edna English. Thank you. Before we have our first posted agenda item, which is a public hearing on a request of National Grid, I would invite at this time my colleagues from other boards and committees who need to call themselves to order to do so. I know that we have representatives from the Advisory Committee, the Recreation Commission, and the School Committee on the line. So I would ask if any of those chairs who need to call their board to order please do so at this time.
Thank you, Mary. I will call the October 6, 2020 meeting of the school committee to order.
Thank you, Carrie Nee.
Mary, Bob Curley, I don't think we have a quorum at this point by my count. If we do, I beg permission to interrupt you to call the meeting to order later.
Absolutely. And how about the Recreation Commission?
Mary, we just had our meeting, so we are already in order. We did not adjourn our meeting, so we're all here ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there another board or committee that needs to be recognized? I recognize George Danis.
Hi, Mary. Bob, I count 8 AdCom members in attendance.
Well, your count is probably better than mine and more up to date, in which case I would call the meeting of the AdCom to order. Thank you, George.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And is there any other town board or committee that needs to be call to order at this time? Okay, seeing none, I know that many of you are here this evening for either the discussion of the athletic field and outdoor court study or the public safety update. Prior to that, we do have two quick procedural items. The first is a public hearing on the request of National Grid to install and maintain approximately 300 feet of 2-inch gas main in Annick Drive. And I believe on the line we have Mary Mulroney from National Grid. We have J.R. Fry, the town engineer. J.R., perhaps you could just begin, and then we would invite Mary to make any comments.
So very briefly, National Grid will be connecting a new main at approximately 901 Main Street and bringing 200 feet of new 2-inch main into Annick Drive, a private way.
Okay. Mary, welcome. Did you have anything to add before any questions from the board?
No, that's we just would like to install new main on Annick Drive to supply 4 new houses on the street.
Yeah. Mary, could you please just let the board know when you expect, if approved tonight, this work would begin and how long it would take, please?
I'm just assuming that if it was approved tonight, they would apply for the permit, probably the beginning of next week, and they would start to work on it as soon as they coordinate, probably with JR and the people that need the engineers, you know, if there's any final details that need to be worked out, and they'd start it as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. I'll start out. Joe Fisher, do you have any questions for Mary or JR on this item?
I do, just a couple, but just to begin with, thanks for a complete package. This was very helpful. I wasn't clear on the status of Annick Drive. That's a private road. Does that have any impact on the town's or on National Grid's ability or authority to do this installation?
No, it does not. They have the authority to do it. In this case, it's at the request of the developer. So okay. There are no, there would not be any opposition to this. Okay. Even if there were multiple residences, so you had different frontage on a private way, private ways in Massachusetts law, it's my understanding, private ways still carry the right of utilities to provide services to everyone that has frontage. Okay.
And this is a question that's come up with respect to numerous projects. Is there any impact of any moratoriums on the street openings? Is this going to be transgressing a moratorium, or are we safe in that regard?
There is no moratorium on this section of Main Street and Annick Drive. Because it's a private way, there is no town moratorium.
Okay. Am I correct that this work is going to be done across the street from the Lutheran Church?
I believe that's correct, yes.
And I'm just wondering what effect it will have not only on the church, but on neighbors in terms of the construction activity. Because I've seen that the work is supposed to be conducted between 7 p.m. and 5 a.m. Sunday through Thursday.
So that was the recommendation from me for any of the work that is in Main Street proper. And that is to mitigate the effects of traffic that construction can cause in Main Street. I would imagine that they would be out of Main Street within about 4 hours, to be honest, that they could get what they need done and get out of the street pretty quickly.
Have you or others had discussion with either the church or other neighbors in terms of potential noise issues, traffic issues, anything else associated with the work, with this proposed work?
Have not. Are
you planning to?
We can make that part of the pre-construction discussion.
Okay. And I note in the package that the town is not responsible for providing a staging area for overnight parking and storage of supplies. So who is responsible for providing the staging area?
Generally, and especially in this case, that would be the developer. Otherwise, National Grid is responsible for identifying any laydown area they require and managing their own, whether it's spoils or if they have to bring in material, anything like that.
And in terms of the plan for notifying abutters, how will that notice be provided? Is it, by mail, tags on doors, phone calls? What's being contemplated here?
Mary, can you describe your process?
The abutters list was delivered to the town of Hingham, and they go over it and then they send it out. They notify and they post it in the paper.
So either Ms. Shell or Tom, I thought in other circumstances there have been calls or tags put on doors. Is that planned for this project?
It can be. The impact on the abutters list that I have is
it's not big.
No, it's not big at all. No.
Right. So I mean, it's not as if you got to contact 150 people.
No.
So I think it would be helpful if those limited neighbors who are affected, that we reach out and let them know what's going on.
Yes, prior to construction, they'll be notified again.
Yep. Okay.
And Joe, to answer your question, Mary, can we do that by door hanger?
We can if it's requested, yes.
Sounds like it's being requested, yeah.
I am making that request. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Bill?
I would second Joe's request that we do it by door hanger. That way we ensure that residents are notified. But I just want to just caution Grid. The world we're living in now, in the past, these projects we've always been concerned about during the day. We've been concerned about traffic disruption, but noise disruption is a major issue now. I know you're doing the work on Main Street in the evening, but for the work that doesn't go on in the evening, I'd ask you to be courteous of the fact that we have children now who are home, in school, and you have residents who are likely working from home as well. So efforts to minimize impacts regarding noise are very much appreciated.
Yes, I agree with that. Thank you.
Yep. And I note that your abutters list lists 6 abutters on Main Street.
6, yes, and
yep.
4, and then the 4 that are on.
Annick Drive. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Bill, any further questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to ask a question or make a comment about this particular agenda item? Okay, seeing none, I would accept a motion.
I'll move to approve the petition of National Grid to install and maintain approximately 399 feet of 2-inch gas main in Annick Drive. The gas main will originate at approximately 901 Main Street, connecting to the existing 2-inch bare steel gas main in Main Street and continuing westerly into Annick Drive to terminus at cul-de-sac. This approval is subject to the stipulation of the Department of Public Works as outlined in the letter dated October 2nd, 2020.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor by roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Mary? Aye. Thank you, JR. Thank you, Mary. Before we move to our next item, we do have one vote on our vote list, which is the authorization to enter into an agreement for a front-end loader. And I know that we are joined by our Department of Public Works Superintendent, Randy Sylvester. Tom or Michelle, could you just please give a quick overview of this request?
Michelle, you want to take that?
Sure. So this is the second vehicle request from DPW for this fiscal year. This is a front-end loader that we would be purchasing for $138,000. This vehicle is included in the FY21 capital budget. We're a little bit short of money there, so the department is prepared to forego the purchase of a forklift for $18,000 to make up the difference. This is the second of two vehicles that we plan to purchase with FEMA reimbursement from the 2015 storms. The first being the dump truck that was before the board a few weeks ago. And Mr. Sylvester has a few more details.
Randy?
Yeah, well, this is this is one of our main front-end loaders, pieces of equipment at the transfer station, and it's used, it has multiple functions. It's used as a loader, a snowplow, a forklift at times. It moves containers. It moves compost. It loads trucks. It plows snow. It is a main piece of equipment. It has been deferred a year. The lifespan on this is 10 years, and it has been deferred a year. And we're in need of a new front end loader up there. It's a main piece of equipment, and it backs up the front end loader at the DPW.
Thank you. Joe, any questions for Randy?
Yes. So at the beginning, I heard mentioned that in order to pay for this, that the department will forego purchasing another vehicle. What was that will not be purchased?
So a forklift worth $18,000 was on the list.
Yep.
I made a mistake and I transposed the numbers, and it was not correct. So I'm about $18,000 short, a little bit short. So we're going to go forego the forklift in order to buy the front end loader, since that's one of our main pieces of equipment. That was my mistake. And that's the reason why we're going to forego it for the time being.
How critical is that forklift? How is the town?
It's still usable. It's still in usable condition. We did have it rebuilt like 3 years ago. It's a very good piece of equipment. You can't buy one like this new, because it's very heavy duty. I'm sure it's going to last another year, and if not, it would be minor repairs on it. We do have another forklift at the DPW if necessary, but I don't think that's going to be necessary to back that up.
Great. And I note that what's being purchased is a 2019 John Deere. And I also note that we are in the year 2020. So, but I also see that the contract says that this is a new piece of equipment. So am I correct that we're buying a new piece, but it's actually last year's model?
Yes, it's a new piece of equipment. It's actually a demo model that we get a better price on. We've done this before in the past. We get probably $10,000 knocked off the price just to begin with, and then we pay for the rest. So we get a better deal on a good piece of equipment that has very low hours, that's used as a demo for other towns and whatnot.
Yep, and I'm glad you raise the hours. I was going to ask, what is the factory warranty in terms of hours? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but we do get the extended warranty. I think it's in years, not hours. So I think we have a 3-year warranty, and we extend that to 5 if we can.
Oh, that's great. Okay, you've answered my question. Thank you. That's it.
Bill?
No questions. I just hope the winter is mild and we don't need to use this all that much.
I agree.
Here, here.
Our budget does too.
Is there anyone in the public who has a question or wishes to make a comment about this agenda item before the board takes a vote? Okay, seeing none, I would accept a motion.
I'd make a motion to authorize the town administrator to sign the agreement with Schmidt Equipment Incorporated for 2019 John Deere 544L 4WD front end loader.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor by roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Mary? Aye. Randy, thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
The next item of business on our agenda, which I think many of you are here for, is a presentation of the 2020 Hingham Athletic Fields and Outdoor Court Study by Weston and Sampson. As we noted, this is actually a joint session with the Recreation Commission and the School Committee, and we are glad that many of our colleagues on the advisory committee are joining. Let me first, I'd like to start by introducing the members of the Field Study Working Group, then give just kind of an overview of how this portion of the agenda is going to work, and then I will hand it over for the presentation. As many may recall, the town meeting authorized use of community preservation funding to conduct a field study. And the town was very fortunate that we had many members of our staff and some dedicated volunteers who were willing to step forward and help with this work. The Field Study Working Group includes Mark Thorell from the Recreation Department, Michelle Monsegur, our Assistant Town Administrator, Kevin Whalen, the Director of the South Shore Country Club, representing the School Committee, John Ferris, Athletic Director Jim Quattromoni, and Katie Hartman, Randy Sylvester from the Department of Public Works, and Ray Estes representing the Hingham Sports Partnership. This evening we are actually joined by Cass Crost. Did I say that right, Cass? Who is actually going to provide us with a presentation that is a summary. After tonight's meeting, a copy of this presentation will be posted on the town website, so it will be available for people to download. Understanding that tonight is the first time we're going to be talking about this, it certainly won't be the last. We're not making any decisions tonight. What we've asked Cass to do is to take about 30 minutes to give us an overview of the study. And during that time, I'm going to ask that we allow him to walk through the presentation and to walk through the presentation. At that point, I will recognize members of the different boards who have questions and comments. We'll start with the Board of Selectmen. We'll then turn to the Recreation Commission, to the School Committee, and to the Advisory Committee. And my hope is that the elected and appointed officials' questions and comments are, again, limited to about 30 minutes, because I would like to give an opportunity for as many of our fellow citizens who have taken the time this evening to ask questions and make comments. I would also note that this evening we also do have a presentation and a discussion about our public safety facility. So at some point during the kind of question and comment period, we're just going to kind of give a notice that we'll take a few more questions. But again, this will not be the only time we will be talking about this. In fact, Tom and I were talking this afternoon, and I thought he made the excellent suggestion that we might want to have some kind of a public information meeting to allow for further discussion and further visibility of this very important work. So with that, Cass, I'd like to turn it over to you. I believe that you're going to be displaying the presentation on screen. So welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate the introduction there. And also for the study working group, thanks again as well. We've been working for quite a while now, even through this past COVID time. So I think we have put a lot of effort here forward, and we're excited to put it forth to everyone to digest and consider. So I'm going to share my screen with the presentation. I'm going to try to err on the side of brevity here as best as I can, so that any questions and answers can kind of take precedence. So just one moment. Can I get a confirmation that my screen is up with the front page?
You can see that. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, great. All right. So welcome, everyone. And here's just a quick overcap of what we're going to be talking about today. So really, we're just going to do a short recap of what we've been doing for the last over a year now in terms of deriving towards the results that we're going to try to outline today. And with that, we're going to provide information on the general recommendations, as well as some key site-by-site recommendations. And those key site-by-site recommendations will not be everything that we've done, but just more of the larger ones or the more high-profile ones that we want to highlight for you today. And then at the end of the day, to wrap up, we want to talk about the action plan, where it talks about those improvements and also kind of starts to think about how those might be prioritized or organized. So, and then of course, following up with a Q&A, I'm always a fan of more dialogue and talking things through. I find that to be more effective for everyone. So starting out, the needs assessment here, this is one of the things that we started out in terms of for this project to say, all right, what does Hingham have? What does it need? What is it lacking? What's it doing excellent in? And really kind of take those things together and synthesize that information and start to make some decisions and thinking about that. So first off, we did a facility assessment and analysis, and that's where we go visit every facility and property and inventory, everything that you have within the town. And we also kind of make note of what the conditions are and kind of anything that catches our eye. So those are in the field studies that we perform. And we did perform those with city or town staff as well. So we got some anecdotal information as well, which is always helpful. And then also we did a public engagement outreach. At least it was more robust before COVID-19 has taken a chunk of our lives. But we also augmented this with the user survey and some stakeholder meetings before things, in-person stakeholder meetings as well. The field usage matrix, that's where we start to think about the fields quantitatively, so we can actually get some hard data that actually really helps us hone some of the thinking and actually back it up with tried and true information. And then also we looked at the town's permitting and scheduling protocols, as well as the maintenance protocols, to see how those may or may not be impacting the facilities at large. So in terms of the inventory, here's a list of all the properties that Hingham has. And I've broken this down by 3 different jurisdictions. And that's kind of a key thing here that shows you that you have athletic facilities across 3 different jurisdictions. And that's somewhat unique for a town. And it does present some challenges, but it does one of those things where I think the town could be well positioned to take advantage of that as well. So in terms of the public meetings and engagement that we've done, this is a kind of a timeline overview of all the engagement and participating that we've done. It's including the working group. You can see we have some stakeholder meetings earlier. That's where we met with 15 different stakeholder groups. That includes the youth football, baseball, you name it. We kind of met with them and kind of got their take on everything and really kind of digested those. So those are super helpful. And I want to thank them for their time for participating in that. And in the public survey, we did have 519 participants, and I want to say that that is a good outcome and a good turnout from our perspective, and we do a lot of those. And all those things did start to drive information for what we're thinking about. So in terms of the field usage matrix, this is what we talk about, where we look at permitting data and hours of use data, and that's where we can start to say, all right, so we see what we see out there in the field with our boots on the ground, but what about what might be driving that from a data standpoint? And so the numbers of the fields, you have 37 natural grass field footprints and 1 synthetic turf field at the high school. And in terms of annual hours of use, and that's the key, is annual, there's 14,600. And so we found that most fields are used near or beyond the maximum number of recommended hours per year. And that recommendation is between 450 and 500 hours annually. And that depends on maintenance and the protocols there. So that is also to say that some fields are used more and some are used less. So that is just an average. The numbers for the courts, there isn't really an hours of use data there. It's a hard surface, so it doesn't quite have the same kind of importance. However, the key thing is the inventory itself. And you can see 31 tennis courts is quite a high number, as well as 11 basketball courts, and then the 1 hockey court as well. In terms of takeaways, we found that there was a shortage of rectangular multi-use fields. And that goes up to say, hey, we see the total number of hours that Hingham is demanding of its fields, and it's actually falling short in order to keep those fields at a good performing level. And oftentimes the field performance is exacerbated by poor drainage or poor initial construction or maybe insufficient maintenance. And so as well, we found that there's a surplus of tennis courts. There's no dedicated pickleball courts despite it's an increasing demand. That's a unique one that's actually one of the highest growing sports in the country at the moment. In terms of permitting and scheduling, we did find that there are 3 different permitting systems for the 3 different jurisdictions that have athletic fields. So the school properties are permitted by the school staff, while the properties under the Board of Selectmen and the Recreation Department are permitted by the Recreation Department. And then there's an outlier with Lynch Field, which has its own restrictions due to the lease agreement that allows certain use for that field. And the takeaway is as you can imagine, having 3 different systems in place makes it a little difficult for those sports program folks that are trying to organize their days and their weeks and their practices and games. It makes it difficult for them to navigate and track and really have transparency in what's going on and have a full picture of what they're looking at on a system basis townwide. And in terms of maintenance protocols, I think it has a little bit to do with the jurisdiction, but as well, we found that this is being performed by several different entities. Recreation Department takes on certain aspects. The DPW does some. The school facilities does. The school facilities staff does some. The North Shore Country Club maintenance staff has kind of has taken on some work, and that's been fluctuating up and down over the years. And also outside contractors are performing things. And as well on baseball fields, I want to point out as well that volunteers do perform a significant amount of that maintenance there on those. And a lot of this information we actually have a lot of this data in the report. So this will be fully in the report and we'll show all the detail that it has there. So I'm just trying to kind of hit the highlights of these things. But if you look at the matrix on a whole, you will see that it is kind of all over the map in terms of who's performing what for what different type of properties. And as you can imagine, what that creates is some inconsistencies in field conditions, which can adversely impact the quality of play and the performance of the field. And it's one of those things where it's a challenge for each field to have an even and equitable play. So some fields are better than others, and that just then also starts to dictate who uses those fields. Maybe if it's a better field, they'll try to be used more. So that starts to kind of exacerbate the issue of how much demand is put on certain fields. And overall, the overall general recommendations, as you can imagine, centralized permitting and scheduling, that's a pretty easy one to do. I think that the town already has a permitting system in place that it can actually just fold everything into, as well as they can put that information up onto a central municipal website as well. Centralize the maintenance, increase the funding, and increase the staffing. So I want to highlight this one particularly just because I think before we even talk about some of the future capital investments that we're bringing up later here in this presentation, that maintenance is a critical piece where it really allows you to protect that future investment that you would make within any capital improvement to an athletic field. So if you have that maintenance in place already in terms of the staff and the money and the materials that they need to have, that helps them better take care of the fields and really protect that investment and actually maximize that playability of that rectangular field space. And as part of this, we also are calling for the construction of an additional synthetic turf field, maybe 2. And that always helps relieve pressure in terms of hours of demand on natural grass fields. So the one key thing for synthetic turf fields, which you guys might have had a big discussion about this when the high school put the first one in, is that those fields can typically take about as many hours as you can possibly put on it. And to jump ahead to a bullet point here, With synthetic turf fields, since you can maximize the hours there, we always recommend that you install appropriate height sports lighting at those fields, just so you can really maximize and put folks on those fields to take as much pressure away from the natural grass fields and get those performing at the best possible level. And then, of course, holistically, on a system basis, improve existing facilities through capital investment and do strategic improvements, whatever those will be. We'll highlight some of those later. And then lastly, to establish and enforce a field use policy. So what that means is basically for the town to say, all right, so we have these fields, natural grass fields particularly. If we have a rainstorm, for instance, we don't want you to be on that field for at least 48 hours to allow that field to dry out sufficiently so that it doesn't muck up the grass. And really, so what happens is the grass is a living medium and it doesn't enjoy those things. And so once it gets destroyed, it's up against it, and oftentimes it begins to start to fail. And that's pretty common across the board, not just in Hingham, but most places. All right, so now we're going to jump into more of the fun stuff where we get into some of the site-by-site recommendations. And this is in alphabetical order, so we haven't gotten into any priorities yet. So we're going to start off with Carlson Complex. And this is an existing large footprint for grass rectangular fields. And that's what we're proposing here. Is this would be a great space to maximize a synthetic turf footprint here, to really be able to put as many folks and as many programs on this field as possible, to take as much pressure as possible off of the other natural grass fields. We would like to include the renovation of the basketball courts just slightly, in terms of just some seal coat improvements. Also installing a new backstop at the softball field as well. But one thing to note here critically, going back to the synthetic turf field here, is that we do recommend sports lighting here, given the footprint and given the need to maximize the hours that this field could handle. And then next is Cronin Complex. One of the things this one actually starts to highlight as well is you'll start to see a perimeter pathway here. And those are one of those things that we noticed in Hingham town-wide, is that there is a lack of ADA accessibility and maximization of really kind of making these spaces multi-generational. And a perimeter pathway is an easy low-hanging fruit to achieve, where grandma or grandpa that live down the street can actually have a nice walking path and start to kind of get out and enjoy these open spaces as much as athletic and youth programs. So that will be something you'll see across the board, and something that the town should definitely start to pursue. For this property behind the town hall, we're looking to redefine that cinder track that's out there now. And what that would be is to find that on the outer edge so that we could maximize the footprint there, to really increase the square footage of rectangular field space, since that is the shortage that the town is experiencing. And that would start to include also some amenities where we would improve the dugouts at the baseball field, provide some spectator seating along that new rectangular field there, do some seal coat improvements at the basketball court and some crack repair, and then do a full depth new hockey court. And I have to say that I made the joke earlier that there's definitely some good hockey players in town, because there's definitely some awesome sized puck holes through those dasher board walls. So they can really rip it through there. And that is really used. Every time we went there, which is a number of times, there was always somebody skating around and knocking a puck around. And then at the tennis courts, we are recommending that we install some sports lighting here. There's not very many tennis courts that have those in town, only at Foster Elementary, which is not the best condition of courts. And one of the benefits here for this location, one is its central location geographically, but also its topographic condition, where it's kind of sitting in a bowl. So the height of those sports lighting actually is going to be recessed, which actually helps reduce some of the impact that may occur to some of the abutting neighbors. But also, I do want to make a note on all sports lighting that they have made significant technological advances in the last, I would say, even 3 to 4 years, where they have extreme control over their sports lighting and control the throw there. So if you install them appropriately, it really does reduce the impact. One thing that is not shown graphically here, but will show up in the cost that will show at the end of this presentation, is that there are some parking lot improvements here right around this area where this is gravel now. We want to pave that over. I know there's been some maintenance challenges for the town in that regard, so we're trying to improve that as part of this process. You will see this pathway here that starts to connect down to Haley. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but please just make a note of that connection down there. And here we are. So Haley is wanting to redefine that parking lot space. And as I was making note of that pathway, that pedestrian connection, the key here with this parking improvement is that starts to become an auxiliary parking lot for the town hall meetings. I know there's often sometimes some shortages there for events that are at that building. And so this provides better organized parking, but also an ADA accessible pathway to get there. And then also included in this is some dugout improvements, as well as some spectator seating improvements and some renovations to the memorial there. I know there's some maintenance challenges that have been occurring for a little while there.
Excuse me, Cass.
Sure.
I'm just noticing that your video comes and goes. It gets louder and softer. Is there anything that you can do on your end to make it consistent?
Let me try one thing. I'm going to try these bad boys.
And we'll get some music. Okay.
There we go. Yeah, right. I know. Can you all hear me now?
It's better. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. Oh, perfectly great. I'm glad you did. Okay, so moving on to Hersey Field. Again, we have parking lot improvements here, and this parking lot in its existing state is really causing some problems at the field and really reducing some of the usage, just because the area down here where this larger area of parking is where folks tend to park now, but it becomes kind of a muddy, grassy area. But we want to also add pathways around that creates ADA accessibility to the playground, but also to the spectator seating and also to the dugouts so everybody can participate, even different folks. And moving on to Hingham High School, we are recommending a synthetic turf field here, a second synthetic turf field of a rather large footprint. Also, we're looking to perform some of the full depth reconstruction of the tennis courts there. I know that a while back, some repairs were made on that. That field, and I would say that those repairs typically only last about 7 or 8 years before you have to actually make a true improvement and go full depth. So those small repairs only buy you some time, and then eventually you have to pay the piper. And then these drainage improvements, we are showing drainage improvements here between the baseball field and the JV softball field, as well as some drainage improvements along this eastern edge of the fields across from Union Street. And I will say that there are different methods that could be pursued here for those drainage improvements. Most of them are surgical in nature, so that it will reduce the impact and it's not a full depth reconstruction, so that way you don't lose any playing time. And so that's a critical aspect here, particularly at the high school property. And then at Crest Field, again, parking lot improvements and ADA improvements, linking to the playground equipment there from an ADA perspective, but also coming around to the field. And this field is currently a Little League field, and we'd like to change that to a skinned softball infield due to the actual use of that field, which is predominantly, if not completely, softball. And then Lynch Field, we're looking to reorganize the space a little bit. And the thinking here is that this is one of the baseball fields that is currently here today. Another one is situated here facing this ways, and there's a safety concern there where there's an overlapping outfield, and that presents some safety concerns if games are playing simultaneously for the outfield folks, where they could just catch a fly ball or a line drive coming in from the other game. And so what we want to do is really maximize that space and allow for 2 games to be played safely at the same time. And so to alternate that location over there, but that would also allow us to regrade the field, reseed the field so that the football folks also have 2 full-size football fields, whereas currently today they do not. As well, it would be great to install the appropriate height sports lighting here. I know currently today they have 35 feet height sports lighting due to zoning restrictions and bylaw restrictions. But I think that with this does show these new condos going in there, and those lights are going to be pointing straight into their windows. So if you don't hear anything about it from them now, you will soon. And that would be a great opportunity to better light those fields just for playability, but also for those abutting neighbors. And this was worked through with one of the region's better lighting manufacturers and installers. And also a perimeter pathway, again, multi-generational use, but also connection to Bear Cove Park, which is a really great connection and really is a great linkage in town. And Marquette's Field, this is just minor improvements to the parking lot just to better structure those. They're currently gravel and nondescript parking areas. We want to add some green infrastructure on the northern parking lot there. And then also there's some drainage improvements there on that north field based on some of the conversations we had with the stakeholders and while we were out there and observing things. And then the Hingham Middle School, this is a smaller dollar project, but very important to show. Currently there is a Babe Ruth sized baseball field here that gets minimal use. And so given the shortage of rectangular field spaces that we found, it would be an opportunity to convert that infield into grass and maximize the rectangular field playing footprint. But there's also an option B here if that isn't desired as the town pursues some of these designs. Where it could be maintained as a field, as a ball field. However, it would be recommended to convert that to a softball skinned infield, just for gender equity considerations, as well as it would be a good larger footprint for the men's softball team to have a place to play in town with a softball infield, because currently they're actually performing all of their games in Weymouth. And at Plymouth River Elementary, we're showing this when there's going to be some minor improvements to the baseball field here, converting that again to a softball infield, doing some small dugout and fencing improvements there. And then also the tennis courts, I believe they have just been repaired, like I was talking about, on a short-term basis, but some long-term repairs are going to be needed probably in about 7 or 8 years. So that will be reflected in the cost coming up towards the end. So here we are at the action plan. This is kind of where the rubber meets the road. And we've broken this up at the town's request into kind of 3 different buckets. And one of the buckets is immediate implementation, which is kind of the low-hanging fruit for the town to go after and really set the stage for this. And then there's also small capital improvements, just because sometimes those are easier to push through. They're more digestible for the residents to put forward, maybe even captured in the existing capital budget you may have. And then larger capital improvements, which might require a little more of a tailwind and community support to push those through. So in terms of immediate implementation, centralizing permitting and scheduling, that should be a quick hit and really help the town out, and particularly the stakeholders of folks that are organizing all the sports activities throughout town. And then also centralize all the field and court maintenance. And what that means is then basically to create a single clearinghouse for one person or one group and entity to say, all right, we're in charge of all the staffing, all the funding, all the equipment. And so that way they know what's being done everywhere and that all maintenance protocols are being followed appropriately as well. And with that, there is an increase in the annual maintenance budget to cover what that requirements would be to meet a specific level of performance. And that budget would include appropriate staffing levels, appropriate equipment, and also appropriate materials in terms of like lime additions to fields, things like that. And lastly, implement and enforce a field use policy. Again, not hard to implement. It's just more of putting in the legwork for creating a document. But the hard part is then you have to actually go out and enforce it and tell people, hey, you can't play on this today. I know you really want to, but you have to wait till tomorrow or the next day. And then jumping into the smaller capital projects, this is organized by priority. This is what we as Weston and Sampson, the working group, have discussed through. So for a number of different reasons, this is the organization that we have put forth, and happy to talk about those. So to start, Hersey Field at $370,000. That includes the parking improvements there, and that's because that parking lot is really reducing, the lack of parking there, is reducing the ability to maximize the use of that field, even though it's in a pretty decent condition. The middle school, again, low-hanging fruit, small dollars, but could have a big impact in terms of allowing that property to handle much more hours for town and athletic youth programs. Haley Field, that's the parking lot improvements and connection towards Town Hall. Margette's Fields, that is the parking lot improvements. That's just a lot of pavement. That's why that number is a bit high. But it does include about 100,000 or so in drainage improvements. Crest Field, $300,000. Plymouth River School, $550,000. And the majority of that is the tennis courts. That's 6 tennis courts in total. And Powers Field, that's, we didn't even talk about that one, but that one is just converting the infield from a Little League baseball infield to a skinned softball infield, because that's only used by the softball folks. and South Elementary, again, converting that to a skinned infield for softball. So really, it's one of those things, you're trying to create that gender equity in terms of the distribution and quantity of softball fields compared to baseball, Little League, and baseball fields. And then larger capital projects at Carlson Complex with that large synthetic turf field footprint, that's at about $4.3 million. The Hingham High School is about $4.2 million. Lynchfield is $2.2 million. And Cronin Complex is $2.1 million. And particularly for Carlson, as well as Lynchfield, those numbers, I'd like to point out to the fact that those do include sports lighting, and that is a significant dollar investment. Those do not come cheaply. And with that, I want to open it up for questions, and happy to hear what you have to say.
Cass, thank you. Thank you very much. This is you've given us a very comprehensive summary. Again, this presentation will be on the website tomorrow. I'd also mention that a more detailed report will also be issued. My understanding is that that's in the process of getting finalized and may in fact incorporate a little more discussion that's taking place. So at this time, I'm going to start with members of the Board of Selectmen. Joe or Bill, any questions or comments that you have for Cass or for the committee?
I'll start. Just first, thank you. This is a study that the town has asked for, sports teams have asked for, schools have asked for, the selectmen have asked for. So this is fantastic that you've made this step. And I do want to spend most of the time actually listening and hearing what the other groups have to say and what members of the public have to say. But I just got a couple questions. And the first one, just to show you that I was paying attention, I'm looking at the numbers. When you went over, this is way back on slide number, I don't even know, it's one of the early ones where you showed there are 37 natural grass fields, one synthetic, approximately 14,600 estimated total hours. And the concern was that that's over what's appropriate because the maximum is about it should be about 500 hours a year.
That's correct.
So when I do the math, there's 38 fields at 500, that would be 19,000 hours. And so we're only at 14.6. So why is it that you think that we are above?
That's right. So the hours, annual hours per field, if you use that total annual number, is actually about 385. We do have this outlined in the report. However, the one thing that I wanted to say is the note that I did make when this was discussed was that some fields are used a lot more, while some others are used a lot less. Like, for example, Powers Field is only used by the women's softball field only a few times a year, and nobody else uses it at those times. So while that counts as one field footprint, it does not really have the weight of the hours of usage.
Okay. And in your discussions and meetings, did you have discussions and receive inputs from the neighbors and abutters to these fields?
We did have some public meetings in several times. I don't think we sought out any specific singular neighbor meetings, but we did have one public meeting where everybody was invited to come. We did have the online public survey to participate in and provide any comments that was necessary there. But we did not meet with just specific single one-off abutters. No, but I guess what I'm asking is, did you receive comments from residents who identified themselves as neighbors or abutters? I'd have to go back and check the public survey for the records on that. I don't remember any specifically from the public meeting, but I'd have to check the survey. Typically, that's where they would show up. Two of the recommendations that you make, one is scheduling and one is maintenance. And you are recommending for scheduling that it all be centralized and coordinated through the recreation department. And that for maintenance, that it really be coordinated and under the oversight of the South Shore Country Club, of the superintendent at the South Shore Country Club. Yes. So I was gonna, if you could just briefly explain why maintenance at the South Shore Country Club, and just the, if you can discuss potential conflicts. And
And I think I told the town administrator this before when I initially reviewed the study. I just remember when people got together in college, if you cooked, you cleaned up. You didn't split it up. And here we've got basically the scheduling. People are going to be arranging, and then a different group may be doing maintenance. And the scheduling needs to really factor in the maintenance, the condition of the fields. And there needs to be input from the maintenance folks back to scheduling in terms of what sort of schedule is really wearing down the fields more, and perhaps the scheduling should be adjusted. So are there risks in splitting that function between scheduling and maintenance between two different groups?
Well, I'd say what's being proposed now is actually a simplification of the process already, and taking a number of entities out of the process.
I absolutely agree. No question.
Yes, and so I think part of this is that I know in terms of the South Shore Country Club, I know that there's been a little bit of a history there with their participation in the maintenance process. And some of the things with that is what they bring to bear, at least from our discussions, is a level of expertise in terms of grass care and soil care, where we found that typically, oftentimes, when a DPW, for example, not that that's the case here per se, but just typically where it's beyond just mowing and weed whacking, where it actually does take on to say, hey, we need to do some soil testing. We need to make sure we're monitoring for different invasive species or pest control, things like that. And so that's where the South Shore Country Club brings that expertise to bear. And they've proven to have done that already in the past for Hingham. And so I think they also have equipment that's already in play that could be utilized and taken advantage of, as opposed to trying to acquire a lot of equipment that would not be in hand already.
Yep.
So if any other the working group folks want to chime in on just the history maybe with the South Shore Country Club, but I know that they've had experience doing it before, and they have the wherewithal to do it from actual getting the fields to be performing and the grass to be growing at a level that's appropriate.
Okay. And I know other folks are going to have questions and comments. Just one more. When you put together the your various action items, and there's the immediate ones and the smaller capital ones, are there safety issues that warrant more immediate action at certain locations? And did safety factor into your creating a priority list of what should be done first?
Safety is always a top concern, and wellness and safety, of course, is one of the things we always look at and we critique when we go out and do our field observations. The only one that had a safety concern would be Lynch Field. However, that's one of those things where I think the way that they're programming and using it takes away the risk that's there. And in terms of I think it becomes then trying to weigh out benefits of constructing a different type of facility at a different location versus that risk that's already being mitigated.
Yep. I really applaud your efforts, particularly with respect to scheduling. Getting it centralized will go a long way. So thank you for your efforts. And I yield the floor.
All right.
Bill Ramsey, questions?
Thank you, Kath. Thanks for the presentation, and my thanks to Mark and the working group for their efforts here. Centralization of permitting scheduling has long existed in our town. People don't know who controls what field, how to get special permits for these fields. So I think that suggestion is an excellent one and long overdue. And I like the concept of a centralized maintenance unit as well. I think that's a good one. I think, as we go through this discussion, we're going to have to create an order of merit list for different needs. But one thing I will say is the need for an additional turf field is significant. And if you look at the success we've had at the high school with the turf field there, I mean, it's absolutely wonderful to see how often and how much that field is used and how much benefit it is. You can go to homecoming at the high school and see, a field hockey game, 2 boys soccer games, and a football game all in one day. Equally as important, in the spring, we've had issues in town where seasons have been delayed and compressed because grass fields are wet and they could be damaged with getting athletes on the field. The turf field at the high school has been a tremendous benefit for getting athletes out there earlier and getting seasons started earlier. even the baseball team can take ground balls on the turf field. So it's a wonderful resource. I think when we make these field improvements, I think as a community, we do need to think more in the durability, the longevity, and the importance of additional turf fields. But I'm looking forward to hearing from other community residents as well. And I think this is a great discussion.
Thank you, Bill. Cass, I too would like to just thank you and the committee. I'm going to make a couple quick points, and then that way we can move on to our other boards and committees. I'm going to ask our town administrator, Tom Mayo, to see if our town accountant could just gather how much money we spend and how much was budgeted on maintenance for all of our fields for this year. The recommendation in the report looks like it's about $500,000 a year in maintenance. And I'm just interested in kind of seeing how near or far away that we are from that. I also just want to let people know that as we're looking at the investment that's required here, I would just remind members of the community that last fall, the board actually appointed a naming bylaw committee to look at our existing naming bylaw to understand if there might be any opportunities to modify that bylaw that would further open up opportunities for private-public partnership. Earlier today, I asked Mr. Mayo to reach out to that committee. Like many of our committees with COVID, that has made the flow of their work a little more difficult, particularly because they're reaching out to other communities. And you know, we're just finding that when that happens right now, it's sometimes a little more challenging. So I would just mention to people that we are aware of that important work and we'll move it along. Cass, I just had one question, and I'm kind of picking up on Bill's point. I appreciate that there were those smaller projects that were recommended. And I agree with your point that sometimes it's easier to get those. Some of those quote smaller projects were big, you know, $950,000. I think adding up the list, it was about 2.7 million. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when I think about a lot of the pain points with our fields, I think right now, one of the overwhelming things is that the intensity of usage on many of our fields is kind of creating this cycle that is not good for the fields. It's not good for the athletes. You know, and so I guess my question or my comment is, rather than maybe going for some of those smaller things, would we get a bigger bang for our buck if we, for example, explored the option at Carlson Field and said, you know, instead of $2.7 million on these 8 small items, you know, I guess my question to you is, in terms of the needs that you and your committee identified, is there a particular project that you think would best help address some of the issues, particularly, you know, some of the issues that you've identified?
Yeah, I think so. And that's one of the larger capital projects. That's a great question. And I think that Carlson is one of the ones that I look at the most when I'm thinking of those things in terms of really trying to move the needle for relieving. So what happens if you do that project, it actually relieves a lot of pressure on a lot of other facilities. And so by taking on that one, you make it a little better for all the rest as well, because it relieves that pressure. I know it's a big dollar amount, and as part of that, I do think that I think about $600,000 of that is the sports lighting alone. And with that cost, don't forget that also includes about 20% contingency cost, about 10% soft costs. So it's really trying to give you at least, these are conceptual numbers, but we're also trying to be conservative so that when you actually try to pursue these, that you're put in a good position where you're not asking for an insufficient amount, because we know it's always difficult to go back and try to take another bite in an apple like that. So that's one of those ones that can actually move the needle. I do think in terms of the cost, in the report, we do provide different avenues of funding for different sources. And one thing I want to point out is that like one item is an easy one is for naming rights and things like that. We've had a few high schools and other communities in our past that a significant portion, if not all of a portion of a project, was paid for by 1 or 2 significant donors. But that's also up to the appetite of a community, whether that's something they want to pursue or not.
And thank you. Yep.
But so Carlson is one of the ones that I think could move that needle the most. And I think one thing there, if you could get sports lighting there, that would actually be a huge benefit.
Okay. Thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to start with the Recreation Commission. If there are any members of the Recreation Commission who wish to ask a question or make a comment, if you could identify yourself. I'm kind of looking through to see if anybody's raising their hand. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. I would move
Mary,
on.
I know you can't see me. I apologize. This is Vicki.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, this is just such a wonderful presentation, and I just couldn't thank Cass enough for, and he summarized it so beautifully for all of us. I do want to reiterate the key piece, which I think that Bill mentioned it, so did Joe, is the key to having centralized permitting, which I think everyone in town would appreciate, and the rec department believes that that would be great help. And then the overall idea that we know that there are wonderful fields and we have lots of them, but it really isn't about how many we have, it's about this maintenance piece. And when it's a rainy season, it's difficult to get people out on the fields regardless of where they are and how they're maintained. It's a catch-22 because it depends, so weather related. So if we have an opportunity to another turf field, that changes the dynamics of how these fields can be maintained, because that gives us the ability to rest grass fields like no other plan can really do. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention, because I think the rec department has seen that over the years, and we do our best to make sure that every field is in conditions so that sports teams can play, but we can't control the weather and we can only do the best we can. So thank you for that.
I would like to chime in there. I think that's a great point. And that is the one thing about the synthetic turf field at Carlson is that I guess, and in general, when talking about synthetic turf, is that in New England, we found that the autumn season and the spring season seems to be getting shorter every year with more and more rainstorms. And that's the one thing with synthetic turf is if it rains, you can play on that within 5 minutes versus having to wait a day or two or three.
Okay, at this point, I would like to invite any of our colleagues from the school committee if you had a question or wish to make a comment. Okay.
There's a few hands raised. Can you see them?
Oh, okay. I'm going to start out. I'll recognize Carrie Nee, the chair of the school committee.
Okay. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Cass. This was a great presentation, and frankly, it all looks amazing. And I really appreciated the increase in gender equity with the facilities, as well as the ADA accessibility. I think that's so important, and being able to have all ages and abilities to be able to access this would be really good. My question is more for the Board of Selectmen and AdCom though. Just in the short term, how would something like this work with our austerity measures that are in place? And in the long term, I'm curious how this will fit in with the Hingham master plan that people are working on right now.
You know, Carrie, I think those are excellent questions that probably can't be answered right now on the spot. I think we're all taking that in, but as we think about next steps, it's not just how do we move forward, you know, this year, but also how do we integrate it into the master plan? Again, I think those are important questions, and I feel like we shortchanged them by asking tonight. But you know, I think you have this board's commitment that we're going to take those questions up.
Right. Yeah,
Carrie, this is Tom. Do you mind if I just take a quick stab? Hi, Carrie. This is Tom. I would think that and we've done this before, right? But I think that as we enter into the budget cycle for this year, I think it would behoove us to, for myself, to meet with, you know, the representatives at the school department, the country club, the DPW, Michelle and I, and try to get together and take and the rec department, Mark and his team, and take a stab at understanding the best way to organize this. You know, Joe makes a good point about about trying to streamline the process so that we have as few conflicts as possible. Cass and his team have done a good job of outlining the problem, and I think we could get there. We just need to, I think the budget season is the budget cycle, the beginning of the budget cycle here in the next couple of months is the time to dig into some of those details.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's not, we're not going to solve that tonight, but I just think it's important to think about as we go forward.
Absolutely. I think we all understand that the capital needs within the town, and we're going to be talking about another important one later tonight. The capital needs are still present. They remain present, you know, despite what we're going through right now. The next person I see, Liza O'Reilly. Hi, Liza.
Wait a minute, is that better?
Yes, we can hear you, Liza.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. One, were the phys ed teachers consulted on the recommendations, especially at the middle school and the elementary schools?
We did not have the phys ed teachers. We had a school staff member with us.
Okay, so I think just going forward, just confirming which type of field, you know, as we fine tune, that would be great because the phys ed teachers use them during the school week. Okay. And my second question is, where are the pickleball courts?
So there's a couple different avenues to go from there. And one is you can even see in the background of the picture that's here today, you can see striping here. And I think that's where some discussion needs to be had on what's the most appropriate for those to be installed as a dedicated pickleball court. We haven't put forth that decision for that there. I think it's one of those things to decide to determine what the quantity is and where the best location for those would be. So I think that's just something that the town will need to pursue further, but it has plenty of locations and opportunities to do so, given that there are 31 courts in town.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I know I've heard that not from my school committee work, but from many other people. So
yeah, no,
you.
it was, yes, yeah.
Liza, thank you. And lastly, from the school committee, Carlos De Silva.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so I also appreciate the presentation. Cass, I was wondering, is there a full report or this is pretty much it?
No, there's a full report. It's almost like 100 pages or so that really goes through a lot of these things and outlines in detail. A lot of the recommendations, a lot of our findings, a lot of our recommendations. It outlines all of the data that I've been kind of just touching on at moments here, as well as in terms of the cost considerations of some of these projects. It starts to break down kind of just big organizations of what makes up that cost itself. And so it incorporates things like site preparation, if there's like a significant backstop or things like that. That's where we're trying to incorporate those things. So it's reflecting as best as it can in today's times and where you are. I will also caution that in that report we have, as part of that consideration at the bottom, there is what we call an inflation allowance over time, just to give a hint and an indication that the longer a project gets pushed out, oftentimes that cost might increase over time, just as just the cost of construction typically goes up over time, just as you would expect. And so if you start to pursue a project that's maybe 6, 7, or 8 years down the road, the cost that you're seeing in today's report might be a little high. You might need to go for a little more money at that time. So I just want to make that point. And then I guess that's the one thing here for sure is this document hopefully will serve as a roadmap for the town to guide its decision-making for the next period of time. It's not meant to be written in stone. There is flexibility. I think town's priorities and needs change over time. It's a living, breathing community organism. And I think that hopefully this just gives you a resource and a reference to keep coming back to help guide that thinking and discussion points. But that, like I say, that will occur over a long period of time. So that's why this really tries to give a full amount of information. The report is definitely a robust report.
I would respectfully ask that if you could make sure that we on the school committee get a copy of it, that would be greatly appreciated. I have been a huge advocate of actually centralizing our fields, and for various reasons that you have already described. In Quincy, when I lived there, that's what we did. It made sense. I was involved early on with WIMIT and talking about it, centralizing. Guess what? They did exactly that, and look at their fields. So I applaud everyone, and I thank you for looking into this and putting this study together. Would be nice that we can wake up tomorrow and see all the fields looking great. The more fields, the more outdoor space that we have, the more outdoors our kids will be, and perhaps not playing games and so on and so forth. So I appreciate that. I do have a few questions. I saw that if you go back to Plymouth River, so you addressed the tennis court, you addressed the baseball field there, but you did not address the soccer field behind PIS.
We did walk that there. I think it's a small, if I remember the same field, the same complex. I believe there's a small one that's way in the back there. I think it was just such a small footprint that it was mostly used for recess and just passive play for the school, that it wasn't considered as an actual footprint for us to improve upon in that way.
Okay, great, thank you. And at Carson, just to pick back on what was asked before, maybe you don't have that answer, but it would be great for us that when we are considering doing the work at Carson, that we are actually considered the usage or doing something with building 179. So I know that you perhaps don't have the answer now, and Mary had already alluded to that. We have a lot of questions still that will be unanswered because they are still talking about the master plan, right?
Yes.
So I will, let's just leave that alone. But that is actually has a huge potential. The site there, a lot can be done there. Now, is there any room for changing a little bit the study? I mean, this is not set in stone, correct?
We are pretty far along in the report here. I think we're hoping to be in the final stages here. There's definitely, depending on what's brought up and what's discussed, we can make some modifications, but we're not wanting to make significant modifications at this point, given all the work and iterations that we've gone through to get to where we are today.
Yeah, I confuse the fields once in a while, but the Croning is the one behind the police station, right? Behind the town hall, right?
That's it.
Okay, so Croning, have you considered actually putting a field track there? Because I see so many people walking around the field that you have the space, and would that be taken into consideration eventually?
So the way we saw that track that's out there today is that there's really just like, you can see there's like what we call like a cow path that goes through the grass where it's really, you can start to track where most people are walking. And it was a pretty defined singular pathway. I don't think, are you thinking in terms of like a track surfacing type thing?
Yeah, just so people can walk around, so they would have another venue outside of the high school,
So yes, so what we've done is we've kept that outer perimeter. So the cinder track that's there today is wider than it appears, and so what we've done is we've actually gotten that furthest exterior extent, and that's where we made this. This is a bituminous concrete pathway that would go around, so it defines that pathway and creates a nice, even, steady surface for any able-bodied person to do, or differently abled person to participate there. But what that does also is it opens up that kind of unused space about that cinder track is not taken advantage of today, where there's just weeds growing. So yes, we are kind of doing the track, but it's a more of a 5-6 foot path width.
I think I should jump in here for purposes of time, and again, offering time for the public. Is there anyone else on the school committee at this point who has a question or wishes to make a comment? Okay, if not, I'm going to turn over to the advisory committee. If there are any of our colleagues on the advisory committee, I recognize Chair Bob Curley. Bob, I think you're still muted.
Yeah.
You're on.
Okay, thank you. Didn't know it was me or the host. Cass, thank you for all of the thought and time and study that went into your recommendations in your presentation. I have 2 questions, and I'll try to state them succinctly. The first is financial, and I don't know whether that was part of your mandate or not, but I wondered if, other than potential private naming opportunities, you had identified other private, state, or federal sources of funding that would alleviate any burden on the tax levy for going forward with these projects. And the second question is, I wondered if you had input from the senior community of Hingham as to how to incorporate the recreational needs that they would foresee into the use of these public lands. And I will leave it at that.
All right, great. Thank you, Bob. Good questions. And in terms of the funding, you're not the first to ask in any, first community to ask this as well. Most towns are getting more pressed for finding dollars than ever before and trying to find as many avenues to relieve that burden from taxpayers as much as possible. And so, yes, we do. We have a whole chapter in the report on funding. I call it funding approach and opportunities. And it goes through a whole different ways where you can talk about different partnerships that could be pursued. There's different ways in terms of seeking different grants and funds in terms of the Community Preservation Act. There's also different fundings like U.S. Soccer Foundation, tennis foundations, land and water conservation funds. We outline all those things in this report. One thing to note of those is when you try to go for those grants, there is a lot of upfront legwork to do that. And then oftentimes you have to jump through some hoops, and your project needs to meet certain requirements. So it's just something to be mindful of as you pursue that, but to really look through some of the fine print to make sure that the effort is fully given to make sure you check all the boxes that needs to be done. But yeah, we go through and list a whole series of different places to seek out funding. And then for your second question, yes, we actually did meet with I think it was it the head of Council on Aging? I'm not sure. We met with the person that's running the program for that and got her input as well. And so that's where we discussed a lot of that multi-generational use and passage. And it's not just like at certain locations, but to really make it a system-wide thing throughout town. And that's something that town should be pursuing town-wide is ADA accessibility. And that naturally brings with it multi-generational use and pathways. So a small pathway might not seem like much, but it can really be a key tool that's ingrained in different neighborhoods around town that really provides access for people to get out and enjoy open space and be active and healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize Andy McElhaney from the Advisory Committee.
Hi, Cass, thank you. I join the others in expressing our appreciation for the presentation and the thoroughness of the work behind it. I just had a few quick questions. I take it that the report, the 100-page plus report, will detail the usage of the fields and by whom?
Yes, it does, and by hour.
Okay. You have not recommended the creation of any new fields in the sense of a new recreation area. Is that correct?
That is.
Okay. If I am correct, in 2019 we had 21 days of rain in April, and I think even 29 days in May. We had less than that last year, but still April and May have become real challenges for outdoor sports. It's particularly difficult for baseball and lacrosse, of course. And I assume that a lot of this is due to climate change, and it's not necessarily just a cyclical change in a weather pattern. If that is the case, do you see more towns and schools in New England moving to all artificial surface fields because of the unavailability of the grass fields due to the weather patterns?
That's a good question. And as a landscape architect, I am absolutely a steward of the environment and all ecological systems. I am a believer in climate change. I do think that, yes, it is something that's we're seeing on a pattern over a long period of time here, at least for a noticeable while. And other towns, so when are more towns pursuing it, I think, yes, most towns have at least one, if not more than one synthetic turf field in town. But the way I like to think of it and the way that we think of it at Weston and Sampson is that it's part of a recipe. It's not like the end all be all, but there's a recipe of different field types that really come together to kind of give a town what it needs. I think everybody enjoys playing on an awesome, wonderful natural grass field. And I think that people also love playing on synthetic turf fields. I think collegiate level is starting to become more and more synthetic turf based, but on a community-wide basis, it is just part of that recipe where I think if you have strategic synthetic turf fields and in a sufficient amount that it can relieve pressure on other natural grass fields. And those natural grass fields, I think the way we look at it is if it's constructed appropriately and correctly, you can increase the sand-based root zone mix in that to actually allow it to drain just a little bit better so that it can be a little more readily available to perform. But like you say, it's the April and May days are getting harder and it's more rain, but also it's also coming off of that winter thaw where the ground's already saturated already. So it's at a heavy saturation point. So yeah, those fields are up against it to be ready to play on at those levels. But and school schedules dictate that is when they need to start playing. So like I say, I think it's a mix. I think it's what we're trying to do is find the right mix. And that's where, like, for example, at the high school, that's where we're looking to install another synthetic turf field there, but also keep other synthetic turf fields around like Union Street. Awesome, but maybe some slight improvements to the soil profile or drainage improvement methods could make that a high performing field.
The rectangular artificial surface fields take care of soccer and lacrosse in the spring, but obviously not baseball or softball, and those are short enough seasons to begin with. So I guess I just wanted to make a note about is there a need for an artificial turf field dedicated to baseball and softball?
I would say that is changing. Typically, it was just rectangular fields at first, but now they're starting to find that they're looking at synthetic turf for baseball and softball as well. And the synthetic turf system that is used is slightly different, so that it has a more natural field of play with the ball, and a larger, like say, if you took a baseball out to the high school field and try to hit a grounder on it, it would probably slow down a bit more significantly than it would on a grass field. But they have constructed methods that allow it to be more natural play or a natural feel for how it kind of goes and bounces and rolls across the ground. And that also goes for field hockey as well, just to say.
Yeah, I forgot that. My last question is with regard to a central scheduling authority that would be placed in the recreation department. That makes perfect sense to all of us, except for the fact that the school has very well-established scheduling needs and less flexibility, arguably, than other sports programs in town. Is it your experience that if one put the scheduling in a department outside the school department, that nonetheless that the school's needs would be satisfied?
Well, so I will say that we had several meetings with the recreation department as well as with Jim Q. I'll say Q just to help me out with his last name, Quattromoni. But it's one of those things where it shouldn't be done in a vacuum no matter who's doing it. So there needs to be communication across so that everybody's inputting and having their needs met. But yeah, it is understood that the school teams have needs and priorities over certain things. And that's something that was discussed between recreation and the school.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the advisory committee? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to open this up to the public, and just two things. First of all, when you are recognized, if you could please state your name and your address for the record, which is consistent with our practice. It is 8:30 right now, and we do have a discussion as well for the public safety facility. So at 9 o'clock, I'm going to need to cut this off. So I might ask that as people are asking questions and making comments, if you could please be mindful that we'd like to try to get to as many people as possible over the next 30 minutes as possible. And I would also just ask, as people are asking questions, if you could ask one question at a time. If you have follow-up questions, raise your hand again. I'm happy to recognize you. And I'm actually going to start by recognizing Bill Crean, who is from the Hingham Sports Partnership.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks to everyone that contributed to this study. I just want to make 3 quick observations so we can keep moving along, and I'm sure we're going to have many more meetings to get more details. But first, I'd like to just point out that parents that are using these fields with their kids are not only paying taxes, but I think it's just important to point out that they're paying a lot of fees for all the youth organizations, and there are also fees, up at the high school to use these fields. And in addition to that, for just recently, soccer and lacrosse, combined to give $6,000 to reseed Carlson while we were in the pandemic to, try to improve those fields. And as you mentioned earlier, a lot of players and parents are using their labor on the field. So I think it's just important to note that, people are currently paying a lot between taxes and fees to use these fields. And, again, we can get into where those fees go and all that. But, I just wanted to, point that out. Secondly, I think it's important to know that we can value engineer this plan. I was talking with somebody very knowledgeable about turf, and they told me, ballpark for a single turf field about $1 million, and for a double sheet, $1.5 to $1.7 million. So when you see some of these really large numbers, you could have a major impact by doing a double, sheet turf field somewhere. And I think when you dig into some of these numbers at the different places, you can value engineer that and have a major impact. And then I would just like to close with, I hope we can take action and set an aggressive goal to get it done, certainly with the permitting and the maintenance, because money certainly is going to be an issue. And I think Hingham stepped up significantly in with private funding for the facilities at the high school. And we certainly understand, that it's not going to be easy. But, there are things in this report like maintenance and centralized permitting that can get done. And I think we need to set an aggressive goal to get that done and put the right people together to get it done. So I just hope we can do that. But thanks, everybody.
Bill, could you just give your address for the record? And I apologize if I missed it.
10 Edgar Walker Court, and I abut Carlson Fields, and I would love to see turf there someday because my neighbors and all the kids in this neighborhood would love it.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Mike Brazis. Is Mike here? Is Mike there? He's had his hand raised. Okay, I'll come back to Mike if need be. I recognize Ray Estes.
Thanks, Mary. Ray Estes, 92 Fort Hill Street, and member of the working group for this field study. I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to have participated in this. I think it was a great endeavor, certainly very much needed for the whole town. I'd like to just thank Karen Johnson. Just a few quick points and I'll be finished. Karen Johnson, former selectman and advisory member. It was really her vision that kind of pushed this along. And her emphasis on trying to identify low-hanging fruit. And that was one of the reasons of the driving forces behind, setting the recommendations into categories and identifying those initial action steps that could be implemented kind of in the short term with short money. So I just wanted to mention that. Very quickly, Mary, you made a great point at the outset about having another public meeting. In fact, that's something that we had discussed and even planned and it was scheduled for the end of March, and then everything got canceled, unfortunately. So, you know, now that the report has been just about finished and will be made public, I think it's a great opportunity to engage the public on a larger scale like we did back in December, to talk about the recommendations and how we move forward from here. Obviously, it'll be decisions to be discussed and made by the individual boards, and then obviously in consultation with the entire town as a whole. One quick other point, just wanted to mention that when you do see the final report, you're going to notice that there really aren't any recommendations for foster property, and that's because during this process, we realized that we were invited into the program with the state to work for a solution there, a long-term solution, which could result in a new school, and therefore it didn't really make sense to make specific plans there with the understanding that we would be pursuing, you know, kind of a transformation of that site. And then finally, oh, just real quick, I would point out to Annie McElhaney about the turf baseball. If you want to go drive by Situate High School, they just put in a new turf baseball field, and that's a good example of one if you want to drive by and see that. And lastly, I would just say, because I think there's press that is participating in this meeting and on this call, and we'll be reporting about this. I know it's been mentioned about the costs. Certainly Cass mentioned them. They're just ballpark estimates. Billy mentioned something about that as well. I would just caution folks about the costs to understand that these are order of magnitude costs. They are not based on any design specifically whatsoever, and they don't include any specific numbers with respect to cost estimates or any specific design. So I would just caution anyone who reports about the numbers in this that that they be reported in that context. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I'd recognize Ted Healy.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Cass, for this great presentation. I'm with Hingham Youth Soccer also, but also HSP. One of the things I was thinking, I know several of you spoke about, the water issues on one side of, it being wet during the rainy season, but we also have the other side of the coin where things are dry for long stretches. And if you go around to reservoirs, it's pretty dry. So, one of these tasks, if we started doing work on a lot of these locations without having a water resource to water them, then we have issues on that other side. So certainly, looking into that. I know a couple of locations have wells, but there are certainly others that if there's a water ban, we're unable to water those fields. So that's where the turf becomes an important piece to this puzzle, and certainly we'll look forward to taking part in some of these other working groups that we plan to get together on. This is something I've been involved with Mark Thorell for years and discussing issues year after year. So it's certainly an important one, but certainly there's lots of costs involved in this too. So I look forward to that piece. One question also cast, and maybe we can discuss further, if we did pick and choose some of these locations in rest time, I thought part of this study was to also look at other available property, open property in town that could also be used as additional fields that could be an area that could be being constructed or worked on, where, while that's being done and established, then you could rest some of these other fields in the interim. So I wasn't sure how much of that discussion had been made. I know we discussed a few properties in town that, that the town owns. I'm not sure if you had any discussions with the town on land that could be used. One of the pieces of the property we mentioned was Recreation Park Drive, abutting the highway that the town purchased several years ago for the wastewater treatment facility, but it's a big piece of property that could be a multi-use area for fields, and walking trails, and things like that. So I wasn't sure what discussions were made in that area, but thanks for having this tonight.
Could you please give your address for the record?
14 Harvest Lane.
Okay, thank you. Cass, I didn't know if you wanted to comment on Mr. Healy's question.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that we always pursue when we go into any endeavor like this, to kind of look at it holistically, to say what are the needs and what is the true picture here. And so I think one of the things that we look at is just what is the existing inventory, and is additional properties needed. I think if there's sufficient inventory that is in town, but it's just not performing at the level that it needs to be, or you can reorganize some space to make it perform appropriately, I think that's where you could save one potential acquisition cost. But if you already have it in place, it also is already directing it. It's already within the program, be the recreation program or the school program or whatever it is. It's already something that you can make improvements there. Sometimes that's easier, and it doesn't distract from making improvements at existing locations. So yes, we did look at it. We talked about a few properties, but I think we found that the existing inventory was such that we could make the improvements and have the impacts needed without actually going through an acquisition or opening up a new property for this.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Mr. Braces. If you had a question or a comment. Okay. Is there anyone else on the meeting who has a question or would like to make a comment before we move on to the next item on the board's agenda this evening? Okay. I see a hand, and I recognize Mr. Alexi, and I apologize, Evervides. I apologize if I didn't get your name right. If you could give your name and address for the record, I'd appreciate it.
Alexia Verviati, 6 Minute Man Road. A couple quick points. A couple folks mentioned baseball, softball. Much like we're looking at these solutions from a gender equity standpoint, I think we need to look at them from a standpoint where we address as many sports as possible too. And yes, I'm a big advocate for synthetic, for baseball, softball. The amount of days, time, and effort, volunteers have to put in just to make a field playable in April and May is ridiculous. I won't even get into it. The other thing that I hope we consider in kind of the master plan we put together here is, alongside with biggest impact, is probable impact, right? So the Carlson design is fantastic, and love that. I do have some concern and worry about the lights going up there, because I don't think you put up synthetic really without lights, especially where we live today. And that's not there. And you think about that in contrast to a Lynch field, which already has lights, and you put in higher lights, but there's less splash. Go synthetic there. That could be an easier path, a quicker path than Carlson. And that could be totally false, what I just said, but my point is still the same. We need to get the biggest impact quickly. And the last point, kind of, overshadowing all this, is that, I would encourage the town representatives to be aggressive here and show that this is a priority. And I think if the town does do that, and the representatives do that, I think it's going to be amazing, the private power and the amount of volunteers and people that will be working with the town to get these things done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've received a message, Mr. Jonathan Signetti. I believe you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. Again, if you could please give your name and address for the record.
Yeah, sure. It's John Signetti, 6 Delpret Drive. And look, I think everything we've seen here with the plan is super exciting. And the reality is, even though in my case I'm the president of Hingham Little League, I'm excited about every sport getting better fields. So I think just looking at the plan holistically, it's very exciting, whether it's softball, soccer or lacrosse. I think it's going to be great for the community in general. But speaking specifically to a spring sport and Little League Baseball, you know, we are a growing program with 800 kids. My concern is in these plans, particularly the turf fields, there's not a baseball option. And I heard it, Andrew McElhaney bring it up, and then Ray reiterated, you know, there's a field in Situate that's been built. The sports that need turf, well, all the sports need turf, right? But baseball and softball cannot be played because there's dirt infield if there's rain. So you could argue that those sports need it the most, in particular because the season is so short. It's April through June, which is also coincidentally some of the rainiest weather that we get. So I just ask for folks to reconsider repurposing some of these turf fields for multi-sport usage, whether that be at Carlson or whether that be at Lynch. I think other sports like baseball, like softball, like football need to be factored in as well. And I don't know that this plan has fully appreciated, you know, the need for those sports.
Thank you, Mr. Signetti. I recognize Mr. Kevin Clow.
Thank you, Kevin Clow, 18 Andrews Isle. Wanted to follow up from John's points as the president of girls softball in Hingham. Just around the general maintenance that's required, even pregame and in between games, you know, raking fields, making sure they're playable. And while I too am excited about this comprehensive plan, and it definitely felt like all the sports from what I could see are being included. It seems like in the case of baseball and softball, it's also very spread out. And I'm just wondering, and so maybe this is a question to Cass, around what consideration was given around maybe trying to consolidate even potentially baseball and softball fields sort of in one complex to make equipment and maintenance a little easier, even if where some of those fields are not turf, especially in fact.
Cass?
Yeah, I would say for all the plans and concepts that you saw here today, we definitely ran through several different concepts for each property for the most part, if we could. Like for instance, at Lynch, we looked at doing maybe like a Clover multiple field study there for baseball, and the same for at Carlson as well. And then when we put those out there, it helps us to kind of see what the possibilities are, what some of the constraints are with those concepts. But then it allows us to also take a step back and see what that means from a global systemic perspective as well. And so that's we take all that in consideration into what we actually put forward. So yeah, we did explore consolidation at numerous properties.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question or make a comment before we move on? Okay, as I said at the outset, this is the first of what we think will be multiple conversations because this is actually a very significant body of work and there's a lot to take in. I also noticed, and Cass, I appreciate your taking notes. I think part of what we wanted to do here before the report was finalized is to give you and the team an opportunity to hear some of the initial questions and concerns, and you've had the opportunity to hear from many of our sports leaders and longstanding parent volunteers. So we hope that the perspective that you've gotten tonight will be helpful as you work to finalize a report. In terms of next steps, as we said, this presentation will be posted on the website tomorrow. When the full report is finalized, it will be posted on the website, And we will also make sure that our Recreation Commission, School Committee, and Advisory Committee partners are given copies. I think in response to Carrie Nee's question, the question of what can we do within this next budget season and this upcoming year is something that we need to talk through, both in terms of any capital improvement projects, but also maintenance and scheduling. So as we wrap up this conversation, I would just reiterate the town and the board's thanks, Cass, to you and your team, and to all the staff and volunteers who helped out on this. It's going to help give us data to inform important decisions. And that was really what we're looking for. So we do appreciate it. So thank you again, Cass. At this stage in our agenda, the next item of business is the public safety facility update. And I actually am going to turn over the discussion of this agenda item to my colleague, Joe Fisher, who is the liaison to this project. So among other things, I can go get a glass of water. So, Joe, I will ask you to tee this up, and I know you've got a couple people that are here to share information, so I leave it to you.
Thank you. Get your water on the rocks. I just want to set the stage, and there are other people who are going to speak. The project we're talking about is potentially to relocate the police headquarters from Town Hall and the North Fire Station from 230 North Street to a new modern public safety facility at 335 Lincoln Street. Picking up at the last town meeting, the annual town meeting in June 2020, the residents of Hingham approved 2 articles that are directly relevant to this discussion. Article 12, which authorized a transfer of up to $250,000 for a feasibility study and conceptual design documents for the public safety facility building. And then Article 13, which established a public safety facility building committee to oversee the feasibility study, design, and construction for the proposed public safety facility. So promptly following town meeting, town officials began implementing Article 12 by preparing and issuing an RFQ that requested designer qualifications for the public safety study and schematic design. That RFQ was issued on July 15th. The town received responses from 15 architectural firms. We conducted numerous interviews, and ultimately we selected Castle Booz Associates to work on the facility study and schematic design for the public safety facility. Just so people get it right, it's Castle, K-A-E-S-T-L-E, Booz, B-O-O-S. With respect to implementation of Article 13 from town meeting, the town moderator and the Board of Selectmen began interviewing numerous volunteers from town who stepped forward to assist us on this project. Ultimately, the moderator and the Board of Selectmen appointed 7 residents to the Public Safety Facility Building Committee. Those residents are Bob Garrity, Paul Healy, Joe Kelly, Tally Lauder, Bruce McAloney, Donna Smallwood, and Andy Touchette. The police chief, Dave Jones, and the fire chief, Steve Murphy, also serve as ex officio non-voting members. The town administrator, Tom Mayo, the town engineer, J.R. Fry, and the town's real estate counsel, Susan Murphy, have also attended the meetings and provided guidance and support. And Michelle, I don't want to leave you out, but I'm not sure to what extent you've really you want to be claimed by this committee. I'm asking you now, do you want me to include you or not?
Sure, feel free.
Okay, because I know Michelle Monsegur has provided a lot of work and assistance to the group, and I just heard her signed up to continue that, so thank you. The committee had its first meeting on August 24th when the committee elected Bob Garrity to serve as the chair and Paul Healy as vice chair. And since late August, the committee has met 5 times with a 6th meeting scheduled for this coming Thursday, October 8th. And the committee, working with Castle Booze Architects, has been reviewing site plans and floor plans, considering exterior architectural treatments, developing cost estimates, and investigating geotechnical and environmental issues. So they've had a lot on their plate. And in addition to those full meetings of the committee, individual committee members have made extensive site visits to the existing police headquarters at Town Hall, to the North Fire Station, which is Station 2, located at 230 North Street, to the site of the proposed new location at 335 Lincoln Street. And they also got a chance to tour Situate's combined police and fire station, located at 800 Chief Justice Cushing Highway in Situate. And I believe that tours of other police and fire stations in Massachusetts towns are also planned. So all of this work is done so that the committee can perform a critical review of the proposed location for a new police fire station in Hingham. The committee's vision is to plan for a public safety facility that addresses structural deficiencies at the existing police and fire stations, that provides for improved working conditions for our police and fire officers, that enhances delivery of public safety services for the town, and that has the capacity to serve the town as our community grows in the years ahead. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and then to Bob Garrity as the chair of the committee. Tom Mayo, you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Michelle has entrusted me with being able to share my own screen, so hopefully this works. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
I'm going to minimize all of you so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Very thorough as always. This is an attempt, this next presentation is an attempt at updating the town on where we're at, where we are to date. You know, what have we done since we last presented this topic to the town, both prior to town meeting and of course at town meeting. So that's what I'm going to try to attempt to do here over the next couple of minutes. I'll try to get through this fairly quickly. There's a lot here, and I would remind everybody that this is an update. This is an update for the Board of Selectmen, to the Board of Selectmen, but also for the public at a Selectmen's meeting. There will be significant opportunity to discuss this project over the coming weeks, both, well, quite frankly, in several locations with the Board of Selectmen, with the Advisory Committee, and with the Public Safety Building Committee. So that said, I will begin. Michelle, I want to go. There we go. All right. Like that was Michelle's fault that I couldn't figure out how to use my computer. Anyway, sorry, Michelle. Okay, starting with the general project concept, we'll walk through some of what we're doing with public safety, with the public safety facility and the senior center. We'll talk about some of the benefits of the project and some of the risks if the town decided to not move forward, just so all is understood. We'll speak to the potential, excuse me, to the results of the June 2020 annual town meeting, the articles and authorizations that resulted from that meeting. We'll discuss the work to date on this facility with the, as Joe mentioned, the building committee, Castle Booze and their work, their work on the feasibility and conceptual design, as well as what they will be presenting eventually in terms of an estimated project cost, a potential schedule, and what the articles may end up looking like. So as I discussed and presented to the town in the spring, this is the current, the property that we're talking about is the property at, currently it's Russo's Marine on Route 3A, which is Lincoln Street, up near the MBTA parking lot at the shipyard. So that's the property. It's about 3.1 acres in size, and we would be relocating the police department there from Town Hall, from the Town Hall complex, and the North Fire Station from 230 North Street. And we would combine them into a combined public safety facility, again, here at 335 Lincoln. The image you're seeing here is a preliminary design. The latest preliminary design that has been presented to the building committee. This may not be the final design that we see, but it's what we had today. So we wanted to show you what's being discussed as of the most recent and most current concepts that are being discussed. Again, the property is about 3.1 acres and is on the north side of Route 3A at the shipyard. So the public safety facility at 335 Lincoln, this is, again, we're combining the police department headquarters with the fire department's North Fire Station. And if you can imagine the two operations, it's the North Fire Station that's really driving the location need of this facility. The fire department in Hingham is split between, the responses are split between three departments. We have the North Station up here on North Street. We have Central Fire in the center of town, and then of course we have the South Fire Station down on Main Street, down on the southern portion of town that responds down there. So the station is on the north side. The fire department serves as the police department does, all 24,000 residents, but primarily certainly on the north side of town. The HFD in general has received about 4,000 calls in 2019, while the police department responds to about 23,000 calls. But remember, the police department, the squad cars are deployed out into the town, so they respond from wherever they are, while the fire station responds from the station. So therein lies the difference, but that's what's driving the need for the location. The the tertiary benefit of this, although I swore I wouldn't call it that because it's really directly affected, is the senior center's space needs. They are very tight in there, have been for a long time. They're serving about 31.4% of the population in Hingham with about a 5,000 square foot facility, significantly less than the standard and the norm and what is being used across the country. Or what is needed and identified as needs for across the country for senior centers. We would be able to, if this project were to move forward, we would be able to expand the senior center into the current police department space, and nearly tripling its size. You can see some of the operations that the senior center provide and the current staffing that's employed to provide those services. Note the 161 volunteers. Every time I see that number, it amazes me. But this town does that on a regular basis with its volunteer system. Okay, so some of the benefits. Let's walk through each of these. They're all important. I'll try my best not to read this slide to you, but this is an important 2 slides. So we're looking to be able to modernize our police and fire services and realize operational efficiencies as well as cost savings. By combining these facilities into one building. Operationally, like I said a minute ago, this is an optimal location for the North Fire Station. It allows us to deploy the fire services to the maximum number of residents in the shortest amount of time for the North Station's district. And that's driven by call volume. It's along the 3A corridor. There's a traffic light control that would allow the vehicles easy access in and out of Route 3A, and there's a benefit also on this property as that the town has by right zoning. It would provide much needed and modernized space for the North Station for the services and equipment and staff, including, interestingly enough, right, these buildings, the one that they're in is an older building built, I believe, back in the 40s. And back then, female firefighters were not contemplated, so and not part of the force. So we need to modernize in many ways, but not the least of which is by providing appropriate and separate facilities for both male and female firefighters. That's important. We would also need to modernize the police department services and their equipment and so that their staff can operate effectively. And I would stress in here, and I didn't add it to the slide, and perhaps it was an oversight, but I just wanted to stress that it's not just about modernizing the police service, and I think the chief would agree with me. It's about making the job of our police officers safer. It's about making it safer for the officers and safer for, as they refer to them, their overnight guests. So I think we want to make sure that everybody that utilizes that space is doing so in as safe a manner as possible. And that is not currently the case in our current space. And like we said, if we were to move, purchase this property this fall and then move to ultimately build this facility in the future, we would be able to, when the police department ultimately moved into this space, we would be able to expand the senior center into the police department space at Town Hall, like I said earlier, about tripling its current footprint, which is certainly significant and needed. That would allow the senior center to maintain its central location in town, right at the Town Hall campus, yet avoid the additional and significant costs of building a new standalone facility. And it would certainly provide the senior center and its staff the ability to serve successfully the growing senior population. That 34% or 31.4% number is increasing, not decreasing. It would free up over 40 parking spaces at Town Hall. Any regular users of Town Hall, and I chuckle, it's probably not funny because I get there early and get a spot, but if you can't find a spot and you're circling and you're late for your meeting, or you can't get the permits or the work you need done, and it can disrupt your day. There's a big parking problem at that facility. We end up in the neighborhood, which is something we would prefer not to do, having people park in the surrounding neighborhoods. So 40 additional spaces at Town Hall would be very welcome. The school administration would be able to expand into portions of the now vacated or would be vacated police department space. That would provide the superintendent and his administrative support team with some much needed additional office space. We would be able to likely combine a Town Hall lunchroom with the senior center food facilities, which would free up space at Town Hall for our otherwise tight spaces for the Town Hall services that are provided out of there. We would, we're seeing right now a very favorable borrowing environment. You see these rates that we're posting. These are the latest rates quoted to us by our financial team this morning. So, you know, the bond anticipation note rates for AAA credits are looking at, 0.3 to 0.35%. So those are historic numbers, and we would certainly want to try to take advantage of those rates as we can. And then lastly, and not least, but to upgrade our aging municipal infrastructure. We've all known for a long time that we have an aging infrastructure problem. And eventually, if we aren't able to solve that problem, it will affect our AAA credit rating. So the credit agencies like to see municipalities that are conservatively run, but also municipalities that identify and are able to modernize their infrastructure as appropriate. Some of the risks if we were to not move forward with the purchase of this property right now, the P&S, the purchase and sale agreement that we have in place requires that we would purchase this property by the end of December. And in order to do that, we would need to buy this property here this fall, or we risk losing the site. I would stress that the town has been actively engaged in trying to find appropriate properties for the North Fire Station for over 5 years. Many sites have been considered, some more than others. It has been a long overdue process, and we have found the right optimal space that fits we will determine whether they fit our needs. That's what the building committee is doing. If the building committee comes out with that finding, then I would say that there's probably not many other properties that are both available and that would be able to fit our needs if this one does. So we would want to think long and hard about this. We would certainly delay our solving the space and modernization needs of the fire and police department, the senior center, school administration, as we talked about, and town hall departments. And we would delay our addressing the town hall parking problems and the suitable alternative locations a lack of suitable alternative locations with the, as we saw, as I mentioned earlier, in the rising real estate prices. And of course, we have those historic interest rates. At the June town meeting, we had passed 2 articles. One was to fund the feasibility and conceptual design documents that Castle Booze is currently working on. And the other was to form a public safety facility building committee that was very quickly after town meeting staffed or appointed by both the Board of Selectmen and the moderator. Selectman Fisher mentioned the folks that had been appointed to that committee and what they've been doing to date. I think we'll hear from Chairman Garrity in a few minutes on some of this. The work to date by Castle Booze, they have, after an RFQ process, they were selected and they were given 3 primary responsibilities. One was a conceptual architectural design for the building that will accommodate the needs of a new police force, a new police headquarters, and new North Fire Station to replace and upgrade the separate existing facilities of those uses. 2, a draft site plan which demonstrates whether the building and necessary appurtenances, such as parking and access, can be located on the site based on the physical condition of the site and is consistent with zoning. And lastly, a cost estimate for development of the project on that site. So again, they're working towards that, towards those goals. Some of the work done to date, you see listed here, a title review, some zoning analysis, and other site-related work. All is moving forward and will be part of a report that that Mr. Garrity and his committee will be hearing, hopefully this coming Thursday. So the work to date, so the estimated cost, what we're asking for at town, what we would be asking for if the building committee recommends it and the Board of Selectmen decide to move forward this year, would be to simply purchase the property. This would not be a time to build the building. This would be to secure the property so that we can have and own the correct site with the proper design, and then be able to build the building at the appropriate time. As we had mentioned in the spring, the P&S sets the price for the property at $5.475 million. The property had been appraised back in February with an appraised value of $4 million, less $300,000 to bring into an as-is property value of $3.7 million. KBA is expected to provide a preliminary cost estimate for project development through construction at an upcoming public safety facility building committee meeting, hopefully Thursday, but certainly soon, either way, as they are working on that. So potential schedule, just 2 slides up, the potential schedule here. As we're working backwards from the proposed town meeting date of November 21st, if, again, the building committee, I keep saying, giving this caveat, right? If the building committee were to recommend this, and if the Board of Selectmen accepts that recommendation and moves to a town meeting and asks town meeting to take a vote on whether to purchase this property, then this is the type of schedule I think we would see over the coming few weeks. This is not final. The idea is we would have on Thursday, KBA, Castle Booze, would make a report to the building committee. Then they would make a report to a joint session of the Selectmen, the AdCom, and the building committee on Tuesday next week. Then that following Thursday or around then, perhaps we would hold a public information session, followed by a week or so of Board of Selectmen and advisory committee meetings, with all set with the goal of getting the warrants into the mailboxes of the residents by the 7th of November in time for the November 21st town meeting. And the potential articles. This is what we would, if everything were to move forward, these are the likely articles that would be discussed. One would be to acquire the property. The second would be to set the sum for the full design and construction documents. And the third would be to authorize the treasurer to borrow that sum. So that's where we're at. That's everything that we've done that's been happening to date. And Joe, happy to entertain any questions. Oh, you're muted, Joe.
There we go. Thank you, Tom. Clearly, there's a lot of work, a lot of issues that have been addressed, looked at. One thing I'm going to ask Bob Garrity to speak next, but to make it clear, I think if we move forward, the next step is only to be authorizing funds to purchase the property and to do additional work in terms of the design. Right. Because right now, the project has not been fully costed out, and I think it would be premature to be looking for funds, whatever that amount is. The building committee has its work cut out for it to, refine costs and to make sure that the structure that's being constructed works for everyone. But this is really the first step, which is, do we want to buy the property? Is that a feasible location? Bob Garrity, are you on the line? I see your name.
You're muted.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted. So, Bob, I'm going to ask you as the chair of the committee to bring us up to speed, and if you could begin by giving us your name and address, and then proceed.
Okay, my name is Robert Garrity. I live at 1 Plymouth River Road, and I am the chairman of the building committee. We've been in business for about 5 weeks, and we've been very busy. Fortunately, KBA is, Castle Booze is very qualified to deal with study, design, and construction of public safety facilities, particularly fire stations and police stations. So they bring an awful lot of knowledge to us, and they were already beginning their job of doing the feasibility study and the conceptual design when we were appointed. So we have been, our committee, as Tom mentioned, our committee has been trying to get up to speed quickly. We did go through the police station and the fire station. We looked at the site a number of times. We've gone to a couple of one other building complex down in Situate that was recently built, and it houses both and combines both a police station as well as a fire station. We're scheduled to go to a couple more. One will be out in Needham, I believe that's Friday, and we're working on another one out in Marlboro, all of which are combined facilities. Our main job, my building committee's main job at this point in time, is to provide a recommendation on whether it's feasible to build this particular facility, a new facility, at the site, the 335 Lincoln Street site. The site itself, okay, in order to do that, you have to do a couple of things, and I think we've made a lot of progress with our weekly meetings with Castle Booze, with a number of discussions with Susan Murphy, because she's very, very familiar with the site, naturally, because she negotiated the purchase and sale agreement. And so there are basically two things we have to do. We have to decide if the site is feasible. Now, to do that, we focus first, not really first, at the same time, we've been focusing on what the site is comprised of. So we look at the legal description, we look at the site plan, we look at what the existing conditions are. One of the main existing conditions is perhaps a little unusual, except when you're building in a built-out area, is there's a very large foundation left over from the days it was a Navy base, and that covers, I'd say, probably 60% of the site. So we've been a little bit concerned about what might be underneath that site, and Castle Blues has gone ahead and they've done some geotechnical work. They've brought experts in that can look through a foundation and see what's underneath it. And the reason we're doing that is just to make sure there aren't any really major, drop dead problems, such as like major contamination that we'd be concerned with as part of an overall feasibility review. Now, Susan's also been a great help in identifying different aspects of the site that would have to be dealt with, such as we know that there are some active utility lines. We know we probably have to relocate those utility lines unless we can get the foundation design to not be close enough to interfere with those utility lines. And we've also had to look at access issues to the site if we were to build a facility there. And we have to look at the existing abutters, what rights they have to access areas of the site that we're interested in. So we look at the site, and the other big piece of the work is to try to figure out, and this is really what Castle Booz has been doing, as well as they've been looking at the site too. But Castle Booz starts off and they do a programmatic study of what does the fire department and the police department need, what kind of space could be shared, and how big is this building going to be if it goes ahead. Now, that's a very important point for feasibility-wise on whether we can build on the site, because we have to make sure that the building that would fulfill the programmatic needs of the fire department and the police department would be able to fit, and would be able to fit handsomely and within zoning requirements to the extent they apply, and in particular, whether the building could take care of the traffic requirements, the emergency traffic requirements, because we would be having fire trucks enter and exit the fire station right off Lincoln Street, which, as we all know, is a Route 3A, a very, very busy street. So our main focus has been on egress issues and traffic issues. Castle Blues, again, has done a very good job at coordinating this work. There was a suggestion to bring in a traffic engineer who knew his stuff, and sure enough, Castle Blues did. It's a fellow named Jeff Dirk, who the town is quite familiar with. He does excellent work. He's got a great mind when it comes to traffic and emergency traffic and lights and all of the above. So Jeff has kind of kicked in his opinions and even written opinions every inch of the way here. And we basically now are looking at a building site. We've got it to the point where the foundation of the site has been, every week it's been tweaked a little bit with all comments from the committee members, or comments from about the site itself, our comments about whether we need, the egress and parking issues on the site. So we're now at the point where Castle Blues is getting pretty close to giving us a feasibility study that will show a conceptual design. We've seen different iterations of that every week. It gets a little better, a little better. Last week we managed to get pretty much nailed down the approximate foundation of the site. The fact that we would have to put in, we'd have an emergency egress for fire vehicles right onto Route 3A, Lincoln Street, and we would have some ability for the police department to use that emergency egress, but the majority of the parking would be on the north side of the site, facing the water, and on the sides of the site. So the parking for the fire department, the police department, regular personnel, not emergency vehicles, and the general public has all been accounted for on the latest site design that Castle Blues, with Mr. Dirk's assistance, has worked out. So right now we're at the point where we're really getting down to brass tacks and on whether our committee will be in a position to be able to make a recommendation that, well, will make a determination that we believe that this site is feasible for the purposes of building the combined complex. And we're hoping we may have that vote this Thursday. If the committee members still have enough questions that they'd like answered before making that determination, then we'll pick it over to the following week. But we feel like we're heading in the right direction. Now, another aspect of it, it isn't so much feasibility, but we've also asked Castle Booze to prepare a cost estimate. And as Ray Esty said in the last conversation before the selectmen, it will be an order of magnitude estimate. We expect to get a first draft of an overall project estimate. I call it a TPC, or a total project cost estimate. So it would include all the costs that the town would bear based upon the very, just a conceptual design. So the cost would include the purchase price. It would include the completing the design. It would include procurement price costs. It would include project management costs, owner's project management costs, because the town would probably have to hire a person or a company to help us manage the day-to-day work on the design and construction, and most importantly, the construction contract price. So we believe that we'll have a cost estimate by the end of this week, perhaps Thursday. Might kick over a little bit if there are a lot of questions to the following week. But that would really be the final piece of work, last deliverable that we would expect from Castle Booze to be able to really get a solid projection on what this is going to look like, what it's going to cost, and then the town meeting can take it from there. Just one other feature on the site, the building itself, because we have to fit all the different square footage that will be necessary to carry out the function of the building, we have to fit it on a relatively small site. We have to accommodate parking and setbacks and all the other things we have to do to properly design the building. It looks like the building would probably be a 3-story building from the Lincoln Street over in 3A. It would only look like a 2-story building because the way in slopes back to the toward the sea, and the main access to the public and the people that work in the building would not be off Route 3A. It would be off Essington Drive, which is on the north side facing the water of the site. From the north side of the site, you would be able to see that it looked like a 3-story building. And we've also asked Castle Booze to do a little bit more work on trying to give us an idea of what this type of building should look like architecturally, what the facade should look like, so that it would, fit in and be a pretty building to the extent you could have a pretty fire station and a pretty police station. So I think that's where we're at. If there are any questions at all, I'll try to take a shot at them.
Wow, thank you. Very thorough. I see that we have the police chief and the fire chief on the call. And I would just like to ask each of them about the proposed project, whether you're thinking we're going in the right direction, that what you've seen will accommodate the needs of each of your departments, not just today, but for the foreseeable future. I'll start with the police chief.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dave.
Okay, great. Yeah, we've been working closely with the KBA and the board throughout this entire process. And so far from what I've seen, I believe the new site will be able to accommodate what we currently need and allow for some substantial future growth.
Great. Chief Murphy.
I echo what Dave actually just mentioned, what Chief Jones. Working with Kessel Booz has actually been very nice. They're very professional. They have a lot of experience with both public safety buildings and individual stations, both police and fire stations. So they, just working with them on some of the conceptual type of things, they have the experience from other stations that they've built. And so they, are taking that into consideration. Being involved a little bit in the 2014 building committee, it's also nice to see that, there's some things that they're proposing now that have changed within the industry that were not being considered 4 years or 6 years ago, or really kind of 5 years ago when we were working through some of those plans. So yes, this station is not only being designed right now for the for the current trends that we see in both police, and I'm sure it's the same with Chief Jones with Chief Jones with the police, but on the fire end, but it's also being designed with room for expansion. Both what we anticipate could potentially happen within our own department and for the town and all that stuff. So yes, I do think that what we're seeing so far is very positive. So.
And as Tom mentioned, it is the fire department that's really driving this location.
Yes.
Are you comfortable that this location works in terms of satisfying the demand that is currently placed on the North Station?
Yes, we are. Going back over the last 6 to 10 years, we have conducted internal surveys of our call volume and our population density, looks, and we've also had outside consultants that have done that, specifically going back to the 2014 building project. And all of those studies all point to the development that's occurring in that particular area. We also know that there's actually a little bit of an overlap between our current response times from headquarters station at 339 Main Street and from 230 North Street. So, we have the ability to be able to shift this a little further away from where that overlap is. So yes, we do still believe that this is the correct location.
Great. There are a number of issues that I know that the committee is working through. Susan Murphy, you are on the phone. I just want to talk about one issue, which is this location is at the waterfront. Is this a flood risk? Is this a concern that that this location is going to be wiped out by rains, by water coming in from that area? Susan.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Joe. This is Susan Murphy, Town Real Estate Council. The issue with respect to flooding and the location to the water, the one definitive thing I can tell you is that the surveyor who surveyed the property has certified that the property itself is not in a flood zone. And then I know that the town engineer, J.R. Fry, looked at this issue in more detail. Joe, I believe for you and for the liaison, and I don't know if you'd like JR to expand on what his analysis was on the flooding issue.
Yeah, but while I have you,
yes.
Are there other topics, and this is clearly not our first discussion, this is just, I mean, this is our first discussion, it's not the in-depth, but there are other issues that you wanted to just touch on or just respond to questions?
I'm happy to respond to questions. There's a lot of information, so if there's anything specific that people are curious about tonight, then I'm happy to respond.
Okay. JR.
Yes.
Just following up.
Yeah, following up on the concern related to flooding and the location near the waterfront. Basically, we've got the Kleinfelder report that was done, and that identified specific elevations that would be at risk of flooding during significant events under extreme climate change conditions out to the year 2070. And those elevations topped out at around 16 feet in AVD. The survey and the existing conditions survey that we received shows that the site itself slopes from north to south upwards. So as you're going away from the water, you're sloping upwards from about 20 feet to about 31 or 32 feet, depending on which corner of the property you're at. And so that in itself, the building itself is going to be protected from any kind of inundation throughout its projected operational life. And that would be all 3 floors of the building. Not only that, but Essington Drive itself. Oh, I missed that, Joe, because you're muted.
Sorry.
So, not only that, Essington Drive itself sits at about elevation 19. So that would mean that both access to the facility, both the 3A access and Essington Drive access would be open even during a significant storm event, which means that the building could be fully operational throughout its expected lifespan.
Great, thank you. At this point, I'd ask advisory. I know, Bob, you're on. You need not ask questions, or anyone from your committee, but I would defer to you if you wanted to ask specific questions at this point, or wait till a subsequent meeting.
Joe, I have no specific questions at this point. We followed this issue closely, and we are very much looking forward to the Castle Bowes presentation to advisory and selectmen together.
Thank you.
And I know I'd like to give a big shout out to Nancy McDonald, who's kind of an unofficial member of the Building Study Committee, for all the work that she's put into this and the time and hours as an AdCom liaison that she has spent on this project. And I'll leave my comments there. If other members of advisory would like to ask questions, they are more than welcome to do so.
And again, as Tom pointed out, there will be a full presentation jointly to the Board of Selectmen and advisory, I believe, within the next week. Tom, do you have anything else, or Michelle, to add before we open it up to questions from the public?
Nope, that was it. I mean, the goal here was to try to continue to give the public the information it needs to make informed decisions. So,
yep. Okay, so at this point, if there is anyone from the public who has a question, please use the raised hand function. I see one from a M. Wilkin, I believe. Are you there?
Mark Wilkin, 170 East Street.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. I was just curious how long this has been in the works for this combined department, and whether there was any overlap with the prior building committees for the North Station and South Station that was previously approved by the town meetings, and whether the plans prepared by Dora Whittier for a station at Beale Street was ever taken into consideration. A lot of people put a lot of time and effort into serving on that committee, and it was unceremoniously disbanded, and I'm just curious why that was.
Tom, do you have the background on that?
sure, I can take a stab at it. Chief Murphy and Susan, feel free to backfill the history as I miss pieces. But thank you very much for the question, Mr. Wilkin. You're absolutely right. A lot of people put a lot of effort into that location. It was determined somewhere around 2017 or 18. I remember sitting down with then Deputy Murphy and then Chief Bob Olson, and evaluating the response times from that location and the difficulties with that location. And they included the railroad track that's there. There were some potential site concerns with regards to environmental remediation potentially. So we were evaluating those issues along with the known growth of the community along the 3A corridor in particular. So with the new Avalon project that has just been built, up at the end of Beale Street along 3A by Stop and Shop, that facility, as well as within the shipyard itself with Brio and other locations. All of the data was driving the response time, the need to place the North Fire Station further north along Route 3A. And that's why we started looking along 3A around that time frame about 2.5 years ago, and started evaluating different properties in that area. And it was after several different locations were considered, some more seriously than others, research committed and completed, we landed on this property, which made a lot of sense operationally. So, Chief Murphy, did I leave anything out?
No, it was just, the other site just had too many traffic issues was the main thing. And then the second, biggest thing that we identified was the fact that, where our current call volume was, and again, this is back in 2017. So some of the projects at the shipyard had not been developed yet at the time. So we already saw that our call volume was pushing us further out under the Route 3A corridor. And we knew the fact that, some additional projects were going to be coming online soon, specifically whether it was Avalon or Brio or whatever the case. So that all pushed us towards that different location. And the final thing that we did consider too is that the school had other needs for that site too, that when we met with the school committee, or not school committee but different members from the school committee, it was questionable whether or not all of those needs could be met at that same location. But.
Yeah, thank you. That's right, I missed the school component. Thank you.
Mr. Wilkin, anything further? No. And I apologize to my colleagues, Bill and Mary. I typically would have gone to you first. So I will go to you now. Do either of you have any questions at this point?
Yeah, my biggest concern with the site has always been the ability to deploy fire assets.
Bill, we can barely hear you.
My concern with the site has always been the ability of the fire department to deploy fire assets onto Route 3A. So Chief, I was wondering what your thoughts were on that. You're going to be moving assets onto a divided highway, high traffic area, particularly going northbound, to get them out quick as well. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that and then the site's ability to handle that type of deployment.
So that's something that, as has been mentioned, Kessel Booz has already been looking at that specifically with the traffic engineer, and he has identified the fact that we potentially could add one more light closer to where the light is, kind of almost halfway between the light at Shipyard Drive and Lincoln Street, and move it further towards the Fresh Market, that would allow us to actually take over two separate lights at the same time. So as we were turning, then that would give us the option to stop traffic in both directions. And if we were making a left onto Lincoln Street, then we could do that, or to make a right, then it would allow us to do both. One of the things to think about too is that, and I know other people have asked this about us responding on Route 3A. Well, we're already doing that. if the call volume is already up in that neighborhood anyways, we're coming from another location going through that traffic to get there. So in certain situations, the traffic is actually going to be minimized because we're already actually there, you know, so we're not kind of beating the traffic to, you know, get there. Yes, there are other times that we will be responding to other areas of town besides up in that, you know, district. And, you know, we would have issues, but, you know, fortunately Route 3A is a 4-lane highway, you know, so we actually are able to move through it fairly well with lights and sirens, and, you know, it's wide enough that the cars can pull over and whatever the case.
Yep.
And then the only other comment I would have is that, you know, a lot of our constituency is asking, you know, why now? You know, why are we going to possibly, if the votes go forward with this project, to do it in November? But as Tom noted out, with this particular parcel, time is of the essence. We possibly lose our ability to move on this parcel come November. And we've been looking for a solution to the North Station firehouse for 5 years. Those firefighters are in awful conditions there, as well as a need to expand our senior center. But I know this is an important project, and I think as we decide whether or not to go forward with it, I think it's incumbent upon us as a board to also lay out our plan for another very important project, which is Foster School. And as we talk about this as a major capital project we're going to be undertaking, I think we need to, you know, inform our community that we haven't lost sight of Foster School and we won't lose sight of it. But I know this is a preliminary discussion. Those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Joe, I have nothing to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And just, Bill, just to follow up on your first question, the site has been designed and redesigned and amended, redesigned and designed so many different ways to address the very issue that you raised, which is how do we get the assets out quickly and efficiently. And that is, you know, that's core to this feasibility study. So you're absolutely right. It's received a lot of study, and we will find out how the committee ultimately resolves the question. But it is a central question. Thank you for raising it.
Joe, do you mind if I just jump into that point? Bill, you may not be aware, Castle Booze has endeavored to seek the assistance of the town's own traffic engineer, Jeff Dirk. So Jeff is front and center on that discussion, and I know how much our regulatory boards rely on his advice on projects all around town. So I just wanted you to know that he was directly involved.
I'm very familiar with this work. Thank you. And if I could just ask one follow-up question. The light that would be there, Chief Murphy, would be a light that one of those lights that are activated by the deployment of fire assets, correct? It would not be an ongoing, another additional light on 3A. It would be, hey, you got to deploy your equipment. The light is activated to allow you to get out. Is that correct?
That's correct, Bill.
Yes, that's correct. And like I said, it would be kind of tied together to the other light so that when we signaled for both of them, and there are multiple ways that we can do that, we have equipment on our fire engines that would allow us to take that light over just by strobe lights. There's also an option that we could have something that, you know, like what we have it right now at South Hingham. There are buttons inside the station that when we activate that, within 30 seconds, it's timed out based on how long we want it. Within 30 seconds, it will take over that light and change it for us. So there's multiple options, but yes, you're correct. That would not be a normal cycled type of light that would be going off. It would only be when we needed it. The other comment that I had too, that one thing that Kessel Booz has been addressing as well on this is that it's not only how we get the apparatus out of the station, it's also how we safely get the apparatus back into the station. And this is one where they've also had a couple of different iterations that, you know, have kind of looked at that, because one of the things that we're trying to avoid is having to stop any portion of Route 3A when we come back in. You know, so specifically, if you've been near headquarters when the Quint is backing in, unfortunately, we have to stop the road. And that's just, that's the design of, feature of where we're located. Whereas the most current plan that we saw last week from Kessel Booz actually had the apparatus returning through the backside of the station and then kind of driving around a ramp on its property and then pulling up and then backing in, so it wouldn't actually result in us returning on 3A itself. So,
yes, thank you. Are there any other members of the public who have questions at this time? Seeing none, I thank you all for your participation, and there will be a lot more to come in the upcoming meetings. Thank you.
Hey, Joe, you've recognized and Bob Curley has recognized a number of people who have been instrumental in doing a lot of work in a short period of time. And I would add you to that list. As our liaison to this project, I think you've understood how important this work is to do. And you've jumped in, you've been actively involved in many ways, leveraging all of your collective town experience and, on behalf of the board and the town, thank you for the time investment and the value add that you bring to this very important project.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a COVID-19 update. I'm not sure if that's Tom or Michelle, who are both giving Joe the thumbs up.
You have to have some fun, Mary, right? Okay. On that note, I can go into the dire warnings that reminding people of the pandemic that we're all trying to navigate our way through. So as of today, the Department of Public Health is reporting 133,359 confirmed cases in Massachusetts, of which 10,007 are in Plymouth County. As of last Wednesday, the Mass Department of Public Health was reporting 338 confirmed COVID-19 cases in the town of Hingham, keeping us in the yellow category. So please, please, please continue to practice social distancing, wear a face covering in public, avoid large gatherings, and frequently wash your hands. We can't stress this enough. We have been seeing upticks in the community, and we're all trying to get back to our lives as best we can, but we can only do that. We only want to do that in as safe a manner as possible.
Thank you. Michelle, anything to add?
Nope, thank you, Mary.
Okay. Tom, Joe or Bill, did you have any questions for Tom on the COVID-19 update?
No. Thank you.
Any questions from the public on the COVID-19 update? Okay, the next item of business is public comment. The Hingham Board of Selectmen encourages community engagement and welcomes questions and comments as agenda items are discussed in the meeting. In addition, we have set aside up to 15 minutes right now for public comment on items that fall under the purview of the Board of Selectmen and are not already on tonight's agenda. If any guests wish to speak, please seek to be recognized. Once recognized, state your name and address your comments to the chair. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person and must relate to topics within the scope of responsibility of the Board of Selectmen. Speakers are encouraged to present their remarks in a respectful manner and not to indulge in personalities. The public comment is not a time of debate by the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen is not adopting or endorsing any of the comments made during the public comment period. Is there anyone who wishes to make a comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll move to Selectmen and Town Administrator reports. Michelle?
Nothing, thank you.
Tom?
I do have a few things I wanted to mention, if you don't mind.
Please.
So tomorrow, on October 7th, we will be repaving Friend Street and a portion of Main Street between High and Crooked Meadow Lane. To better accommodate traffic during construction, we would detour Route 228 traffic via High Street, Ward Street, and Cushing. Detail officers will be on site to assist, and South Pleasant Street will remain open to traffic. The work should be completed tomorrow, and we appreciate everyone's cooperation and understanding on that project. Next, I just wanted to mention that a member of the Commission on Disabilities asked that we remind everyone that October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. The designation is meant to reaffirm our commitment to ensuring equal opportunity for all citizens and to recognize the contributions of men and women with disabilities to our communities and to our economy. And finally, I'd like to let everyone know that we did receive word today that the fire department has secured a grant in the amount of approximately $22,000 to update the town's hazard mitigation plan. So that was very welcome. Great job, Chief Murphy.
Yes.
Thank you, Chief. Joe?
Yes, so I have been receiving emails of concern from residents who are reading in the newspaper that the MBTA has proposed service cuts for the ferry and the commuter rail. And it's very troubling. It would have adverse impacts on Hingham residents, on Hingham businesses, and on our neighbors in surrounding communities. And there's potential for concern about how this will affect our environment. I've had some discussions with Representative Joe Moschino, and she's been coordinating with Senator Patrick O'Connor to come up with a plan of action to address these proposed actions contemplated by the MBTA. And so we'll be following this and taking whatever steps we can to address what is currently under discussion by the T.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, Mary, I know at the beginning of the meeting you recognized Edna English, which was very kind of you. Thank you for doing that. Last week, we also had another loss to our community. Jeannie Murphy passed away. Jeannie was a longtime member of the Community Center Board, a Rotarian, and very involved with so many great projects in town. And she'll be missed, and I wanted to recognize Jeannie as well.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. I'd also note that she was named the Grand Marshal for the 4th of July parade this past year, and it was unfortunate that that parade didn't happen, but very thoughtful of the committee to honor her for her many contributions to the community, which I know she very much appreciated. I have just a couple of things. This past Saturday, I participated in the school committee and school department annual planning meeting. I thank Chair Carrie Nee, who's still on the phone, for the invitation. I know many of our advisory colleagues were on, and it was a lot of good discussion, both about this year and how we navigate going forward. Lot of good discussion. Also earlier today, Tom and I participated in a call with school department leadership, and again, Chair Nee and the MSBA about Plymouth River. People may recall that when the Board of Selectmen entered into a development agreement with Broadstone Bear Cove, the town received $1 million in consideration that myself and Paul Healy and Paul Gannon, who were on the board at the time, thought that that would be important to designate for a window project at Plymouth River, which we know is something that's been on the horizon. Last year, the board voted to sign a statement of interest to enter into the MSBA repair program. The call today was just, again, a step as part of that consideration. Our understanding from the call is that later this year or early 2021, we would be notified whether or not we were invited into the program. But again, you know, a common theme of tonight's meeting is Hingham continuing to take care of its infrastructure. And while we continue to work with the MSBA on Foster School, we are also mindful that there are some repairs needed to Plymouth River, and we are pushing ahead on those. The last thing I would just mention, and I don't mean to close the meeting on a down note, but a very unfortunate thing happened on Saturday night. Some individuals decided that it would be a good idea to have a bonfire on the third hole green at the South Shore Country Club. Wood was brought into the green. There was a fire. The remnants of the fire were left there. There was damage to the green. The green has had to be closed. It's going to cost the country club, an entity that's been struggling to maintain its financial strength, some money to fix it. The Hingham Police Department has been notified, but I just have to say that in a community that really prides itself on looking out for one another and taking care of one another and taking care of our town, I don't think these actions reflect who we are as a community. And I hope we won't have to encounter that again, because the South Shore Country Club and the golf course is one of the few places of public outdoor recreation that is that people can enjoy this time of year. And it would really be a shame if the country club activities and members of our community were not able to use that facility because of some bad choices by individuals. So anyway, again, not to end on a down note, but this isn't who we are as a community, folks. With that, I will accept a motion from my colleagues to, before adjourning, I see one hand, so Carrie Nee.
Hi, thanks, Mary. I just wanted to adjourn the school committee meeting.
Thank you for reminding me, and Bob, I'll allow you to do the same. Go ahead, please, Carrie.
Okay, could somebody make a motion to adjourn?
As you're muted.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'll make a motion to adjourn the school committee meeting.
Thank you, Ness. Do we have a second? Carlos, second. Thank you. Michelle, just raise your hand. All right.
I'm sorry. This is Susan Murphy. I'm sorry, you have counsel on the call, so I have to butt in. You're going to need to take a roll call vote, so you'll need everyone to unmute themselves, and the second needs to be audible as well. So I apologize.
Okay.
I would just ask that the committees have all audible responses on the roll call vote. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Okay.
With that, I will second the motion.
Thank you, Carlos. Michelle?
Aye.
Jen Benham?
Aye.
Ness Carenti?
Aye.
Carlos De Silva?
Aye.
I think Liza left, and I'm an aye as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bob Curley?
Yes, I'd accept the motion to adjourn the meeting of the advisory committee.
So moved. Second.
Is there a second? Thank you. And we'll do a roll call vote. As I see your face on my screen, I'm not sure it's the same as everybody else's screen, but Andy.
Aye.
George Dennis, you're muted.
Aye.
Daveline.
Aye.
Brenda.
Aye.
Switching to the next screen. Julie.
Aye.
And did I miss anyone?
Yourself.
Bob, aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you for reminding me. Now we have to adjourn. I'd accept a motion to adjourn the Board of Selectmen meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Mary? Aye. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.